Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Blue Ridge Prism's quarterly meeting for October. My name is Beth Mizell, and I am the program director for Blue Ridge Prism. And I am joined here today by Carolyn Politis, and she's also with Blue Ridge Prism, and she'll be helping to host today's meeting. Carolyn leads our communications and outreach programming. And before I move on, I just want to remind everyone that tomorrow is our final seasonal workshop. And if you haven't registered and would like to, I believe you still can register. It's $10 to join, and you can register at our website, blueridgeprism.org. And it is 1 to 4 o'clock tomorrow, and you will learn about invasives ID and control methodologies, and you will also learn about what kinds of things you will be treating at this time of year in fall. And that will be led by Jim Hurley, who is also one of our speakers today. So I just want to run through the agenda with you all before we get started. We're going to go from 1 to 4 today, and we have several speakers. First, I'm going to launch an audience poll because we like to know who is joining our calls, and you know what kind of land ownership is out there, how many acres that you're managing. So Carolyn went ahead and pulled up the poll, and if you could just take a moment, if you're comfortable, and answer the questions, and we'll go through those really quickly. We have about half of the group voting at this point. Give it just a few more 15 seconds, let everyone get a chance to do this. Actually, oh, did I end the poll, Carolyn? It just went away.
Uh-oh. I cleared it off my screen. I figured that was just mine.
Yeah. Oh, okay. The polling. Oh, there it is. Okay. Still learning Zoom here. So I will end the poll. It looks like we have 29 of our 34 attendees, and 72% of you are private landowners, and 41% of you are working in the conservation field in some capacity. And what is the approximate size of your property? 17% is 0 to 1 acres, 48%, 50 acres, 10% have 51 to 100 acres, and 24% of you are managing over 100 acres. And that's a lot of land to manage. So thank you for taking the time to give us that information. And we will use it as we plan other outreach programming in the future. So I will close out of that poll. I'm going to go back into my so today we did the audience poll. We'll have an update by Rod Walker, and then our speakers, Mark Sultfin with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. We'll have Caitlin DeWitt with the Department of Forestry, and finally Jim Hurley with Blue Ridge Prism. And I'll introduce each speaker before their presentation. And then at the end of the session, we'll ask you to take a brief exit survey, and this also will tell us a little bit more about some of the programs that you all would like to see in the future, so we can begin to plan them and think about the kinds of questions that are out there that people would like to have answered, and we can incorporate that into future programs. So a little housekeeping about Zoom. I wanted to, if you're not familiar with Zoom, it's still fairly new technology to me. I'm about 6 months behind everyone else, it seems like. But today there will be opportunity for questions throughout the session and at the end. So we have a few ways that you can ask those questions. First, you'll see the chat box. It's the little bubble that says chat at the bottom of your screen. And if you have a question about the process or Zoom or PRISM, you can ask those questions in the chat box. Or if you see someone on this webinar that you just want to privately say hello to, you can reach out to them through the chat function as well. So you can toggle between the specific person you would like to communicate with or the entire group, or you can send a note to the panelist and the co-host. The second way that you can ask a question during the session is through the Q&A box, and that's also at the bottom of the screen, and that has two little bubbles. It says Q&A, and so use that that interface if you have specific questions about the presenter's material. And then when the presenter is done with their presentation, Carolyn or I will read your questions and give our presenters an opportunity to answer those. And we'll do that at the end of each of the presentations. And then at the very end, you have an opportunity, if we have time, we'll open it up for some live questions and discussion. And you can do that by raising your hand, and then we will unmute you, and then you can ask your question for PRISM or of the panelists. And then lastly, if we don't answer your question today, or I'm sure all of the panelists will be sharing their contact information, but if we don't answer your question today, drop us an email at info@blueridgeprism.org, and we will do our best to find an answer for you. So with that, I also want to remind everyone that we are recording today's session, and that it will be available on our YouTube channel within the next few days. So we've launched our poll, and I think we are ready to go ahead and begin with our speakers. So let me end my presentation and stop sharing my screen. And then I'm going to turn this over to Rod Walker, and he will be giving us an update, a quarterly update on PRISM's activities. Rod is the founder and now president of Blue Ridge PRISM. So I'll turn it over to you, Rod.
Thank you very much, Beth. And
Thank you.
well, welcome everybody. Delighted to have you all here today. My section is going to be quite brief. I'm going to just quickly go through a few topics. First of all, obviously, hope everybody's healthy and finding lots of time to spend outdoors. As you all know, it's been the weather is fabulous and the plants are doing really well. Even if we're hunkered down, they're not. So I'm going to give a quick update on our changing of the PRISM to its own 501c3. Talk just one slide about fundraising, an update on our activities, and then just say if anybody's got any questions around the PRISM itself. So this, as I say, this will be fairly brief. As long as I can make this move to the next screen. Let's see, let's try this. There we go. Okay, in terms of 501c3 status, as most of you know, we've been operating for the last 6 years as a project of the Shenandoah National Park Trust. Yeah, they've been the 501c3 umbrella that we have operated underneath. But in August, we incorporated as the Blue Ridge PRISM Inc. And we're going through all the filing of all the necessary papers to get everything to set us up as a standalone nonprofit. One part of that is filing with the IRS for 501c3 status, and which shouldn't be an issue. This should just be a question of processing the paperwork. But we went back and checked with them a week ago, and in terms of the status of our application, and they basically said, don't bother us for another 6 months. We have a bit of a backlog, so it may take a while for that to be come through. But it will be retroactive to the 4th of August. And we do have our insurances in place, workman's comp, liability, etc. And we've just moved our payroll from the trust over to the PRISM's new bank accounts. And we're in the process of taking our existing grant programs and changing the contracts and moving them over to the PRISM from the trust as well. In terms of how we actually operate as the PRISM, very little is going to change. The mission's the same. All the things we do every day are the same. we've got the same leadership team with volunteers and employees, a handful of people doing the bulk of the work, and none of that changes. We are setting up a formal board of directors, which is different than the steering committee that we used to have. The steering committee is going to become our advisory council. So this group of, if you will, government agencies and nonprofits and other experts in the business will operate as an advisory council to the PRISM. We will have formal officers, president, treasurer, and secretary. As Beth noted, we've got 2 employees, Beth full-time and Carolyn part-time, and we're still basically still volunteer, and landowner driven. So there's, I say, very little that's changed in terms of what do we actually do and how do we go about doing it. From a fundraising standpoint, it's still the case that the PRISM is 100% funded through grants and donations. We typically operate with 2 matching grants as the core of our funding. One from the Virginia Environmental Endowment and the other one from a local family foundation. And each one of those grants requires us to find an additional $20,000 of donations to match it. So that really, when you add all that up, it comes out to about $80,000, which is most of our operating budget for the year. And we are just literally getting our annual fundraising campaign underway. And we do have one of those 2 grants active and in place today, which means that any donations that we get at this point, here on generates a 1-for-1 match. So any of you so inclined, we'd really appreciate your support. And whatever you are able to send to us, we will have it doubled through the matching process. And so you can go to our website, for example, and click on the donate button, and anything you do would be greatly appreciated. In terms of activity updates, so we have our quarterly meetings like this one. This is one of them, with speakers via video conferencing. And we used to do a lot of tabling events. We don't do very many of those at the moment because obviously most of those events that we would table at have been canceled. Every once in a while, one of them happens. But we all want to stay safe and follow the rules. We do a fair number of speaking engagements, and we are available for video conference speaking engagements for your group. So we've been doing some number of those, and we still do our workshops. So we typically do 3 landowner focused workshops, 3 in the spring, 3 in the summer, 3 in the fall, 3 different dates. As Beth noted, the last one in the fall series is tomorrow. Jim's giving it. We used to have both classroom sessions and field walks. For the moment, we're just doing the classroom sessions. We're still working on figuring out how to do a safe field walk and make that really work right. There's some good ideas on the table, so hopefully we'll work our way through that and make that happen at some point. The good news is that from our standpoint, workshops and speaking engagements and even quarterly meetings, typically the attendance is now higher than it used to be because we get people from all over the state instead of just people who can conveniently drive to the location of the event. So we've got good turnout on all these kinds of events. Carolyn puts out a quarterly newsletter for us. So we try and put interesting and useful information in there. And of course, we have our usual materials available for download from our website. From a standpoint of landowner financing, we have generated over $1 million in grants and awards over the last number of years. And there'll be a little more detail on that here in the next slide. Here's the landowner financing. So our NRCS RCPP program is still underway. We're in year 4 of it. And there's conversations with NRCS on a couple of things. But it turns out at the moment that we have $40,000 of unused, underutilized funds in that program. And we're working with the NRCS and hopefully there'll be an opportunity for the existing participants, only the existing participants, to get a 4th year added onto their 3-year EQIP contract, if in fact there is a need, a justifiable need for that to happen. So stay tuned. Hopefully there'll be something coming out on that if you're an existing participant. Hopefully something will come out in the next month about that. So stay tuned. We do have our $250,000 DuPont grant that we just finished the 3rd year's work in implementing that, which is treating Wavyleaf grass at 6 sites. And we just did the 1st year of a new 3-year grant through, thank you, Caitlin, through the Department of Forestry from the U.S. Forest Service. So we're doing some additional Wavyleaf there. So one of the things with the higher attendance at a lot of our events, it also means that our mailing list is greatly expanded. We're up almost 50%. We're up about 50%, from January when we had 1,300 people on our mailing list, and now we're going to be just short. Well, we'll hit 2,000, by the end of the year at the rate we're going. So that's great news actually. From other activities on a statewide basis, a lot of the things we had been doing have quiesced somewhat, but as circumstances permit, we're going to be re-engaging with the 2 secretariats, Natural Resources and Agriculture and Forestry, as well as with a lot of the key agencies that we deal with frequently. One of the ones worth noting there is VDOT. Through the efforts that in our conversations with VDOT, they have engaged Virginia Tech to do a study that's supposed to start in January to survey the plants along the roadsides of 50,000 miles of roadsides in Virginia. They're going to sample quite a variety of places, identify what plants are growing there, both natives and non-natives, and use that information to come back to VDOT with some recommendations on changing their planting lists to favor native plants and hopefully take off most of the non-natives and all the invasive plants. So some other things we're working on a statewide basis is still the noxious weeds list. In July, we had 6 new plants that we officially got added to the noxious weeds list. We're now working on the next round, and actually we have our next meeting of the Noxious Weeds Advisory Council that's coming up on Friday. So there's a lot of work to be done here in terms of nominating more plants for the list. So if anybody's got some time, energy, and interest, we'd be happy to have some people help us do this. As I say, there's a lot of opportunity there. As some of you know, we've had a drone project underway with UVA that we got financing for them from the NRCS, and that project continues to move along quite nicely. We do have some preliminary results of using the drone and the hyperspectral imaging camera to identify autumn olive in particular. And so the preliminary results of that are pretty promising. So stay tuned. We'll probably have them come speak at one of our upcoming quarterly meetings. And as always, we always note that if any of you out there are interested in forming another PRISM to increase the coverage of PRISMs in the state of Virginia, we here at the Blue Ridge PRISM are happy to help and can share a lot of information and practices about how to make that work. Coming down to the end here, things everybody else can do to help. Hey, understand what you've got on your property, how to deal with those invasive plants. Work with your neighbors to help them understand and perhaps work together. If you find any of the less common invasive plants, please report them on one of the phone apps for doing that. You can help us nominate more plants for the noxious weeds list. There's a lot of public parks out there that are looking for volunteers to come help remove invasive plants. And of course, if you're doing planting, please plant the native plants. The best way to defend your own borders is, again, form a neighborhood group or a PRISM in your local area. So just a couple of quick reminders. Hey, if you're inclined to donate, please see our website. If you need a speaker for another group, let us know. We're happy to come do those types of things. And at that point, I'm just going to turn it over for questions. Are there any questions out there, Beth and Carolyn?
Rod, no, we don't have any questions on this session.
Not a problem. Sounds good. We will, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay,
You can take us onward.
great. Thank you, Rod. All right, so I will move on to our speakers for this afternoon. And our first speaker is Mark Sutphin. And Mark, I'll give you a second to get your screen shared so we can see it. And Mark, you're on mute too.
I think I'm unmuted now. Can you see that?
Yes, and
right.
let me give a brief introduction and then I'll turn it over to you. Mark received a Bachelor of Science in Horticulture from Virginia Tech in 2001, and following college, returned to Winchester area to work in the landscape industry. Mark joined the Virginia Cooperative Extension as an Agriculture and Natural Resources Associate Extension Agent in November of 2011. He works out of the Extension Services Frederick County office and also serves Clark, Page, Shenandoah, and Warren counties. Today, Mark will talk about the spotted lanternfly, which is a new invasive insect that arrived in Virginia in 2018. I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. Unfortunately, I am getting plenty of speaking engagements about this insect, and I feel like I'm always the bearer of bad news. So I'll apologize up front, but this is an important topic. So thank you for featuring it, and thanks for taking the time to tune in and learn about spotted lanternfly. This is a new invasive insect pest, as Beth alluded, that we are now dealing with here in Virginia, a fairly small population in the northern part of the state, and I will show some maps and details coming up. But the insect itself is native to Asia, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam region. In Asia, it has been a pest as well, an invasive imported pest in South Korea, as well as parts of Japan. And then it has since made its way to North America. Before I dive too far into the presentation, there's my contact information, so you can capture it now if you want, or I'll show it again at the end, my email address. Also wanting to acknowledge Eric Day and Tree Dellinger, who are in the Insect ID lab at Virginia Tech. The two of them developed many of these slides that you will see this afternoon and have been instrumental, along with others, in the management and outreach efforts that we at Virginia Cooperative Extension and Virginia Tech have had ongoing with the arrival of spotted lanternfly to Virginia. So here's the map, the latest map that IPM New York puts together, and it shows the current areas of infestation in North America. Spotted lanternfly first arrived, or was first detected, in Berks County, Pennsylvania. So that's the southeast region, a little bit northwest of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. And since 2014, it has expanded to the region you see there. In the last year, well, in 2019, I believe they doubled the number of counties that are infested, that are now shown there with the blue coloration outlined in red to delineate infestation as well as quarantine. Is the red outline. You'll also notice in Pennsylvania, this showed up late in 2019, 2 counties to the west out near Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania that have some small isolated populations there. Unfortunately, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland have joined the game due to their proximity to Berks County, the southeast region of Pennsylvania. And our population here in Virginia was discovered in January of 2018 in Frederick County, Virginia, just north of Winchester city limits. You'll notice on this map Berkeley County, West Virginia to the north of us, and Clark County, Virginia to the east of us, and Frederick are now highlighted blue. They have an infestation present. It's not yet been delineated state quarantine for the pest by the state departments of ag for Berkeley County, West Virginia, or Clark County, Virginia. Although, especially Clark County, we're finding some more numbers this year and some egg masses, so the quarantine is likely imminent. A new find this year, 2020, has been the county there showing in blue up in Connecticut. And a previous version of this map delineated it, but it does not now. There is a small population in Washington County, Maryland, the Hagerstown, Maryland area. You'll notice the purple or pink dots that are posted on some of the counties throughout the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And those are basically transportation intercepts where the insect has been moved, possibly dead, possibly alive, just a single or a few finds with commerce or vehicle movement or something of that nature. I know there are several others that are not showing up on this map in Virginia, and we'll talk some more about the quarantine later in the presentation. We'll also talk some about how this pest is just a fantastic hitchhiker at all life stages. So the threat of human movement is really the greatest concern with moving this pest to other areas. To get a little more detailed into the Virginia location and find, I mentioned it was found January 10th, 2018. In Frederick County, actually by a Virginia Department of Ag and Consumer Services plant health inspector, Tom Carey. Initially, the Department of Ag here in Virginia did surveys, egg mass surveys, and delineated the area to be about a square mile, maybe 2 square miles of infestation. Here is the city of Winchester, which sits right in the center of Frederick County. We are the northernmost county in Virginia. And the find, as I alluded, that square mile or so was just on the north edge of Winchester in the county of Frederick. This is a screenshot of a mapping tool we're using with volunteers and others reporting in, and this is showing you the current reports that have come through my office this year in 2020. So this is the county of Frederick shaded in gray. Clark County is to the east, and that initial square mile or two is noted there by the yellow square. All of the pink dots are positives. Basically, all of these are known breeding population areas, with the exception of the one that's showing up far south towards Middletown, closest to Shenandoah County in the southern part of Frederick. That was a transportation intercept down there. But you can see the expansion since January of 2018, just in 3 seasons, 3 life cycles of this insect, because they have 1 complete life cycle per year. We have seen the infested area. Virginia Department of Ag is saying it's officially at about 75 square miles currently. But if you take measurements, just rough measurements from Gore in the western part of Frederick County to Berryville in Clark County, and then basically the length of 81, Interstate 81, which runs right to the east of Winchester through the middle of Frederick County from West Virginia down into Shenandoah and Warren counties. South of us, we're fringing on really 500 acres or 500 square miles of kind of area we're looking at and surveying, and spotted lanternfly is known to be. This is what we're currently seeing in the field. The current life stage are these adult lanternflies. Also, you'll see on this or in this photo is an egg mass. We are seeing egg masses as well. The adults have been laying for several weeks and will continue to lay until they are killed off by cold temperatures in the next few weeks. The past 2 years, we've seen them live into the first week or two of November. Pennsylvania has reported them living into December or even the first week of January in some of the warm falls, early winters that we've had since they've had the population since 2014. I will also note that this is Tree of Heaven, the primary and favorite host of spotted lanternfly. So that helps make you guys the perfect group to learn about spotted lanternfly. These insects, unfortunately, pair very well with Tree of Heaven. Obviously, it's an invasive weed species itself from Asia, and the primary host in Asia for spotted lanternfly, and they do quite well on it here in North America. I also wanted to point out before I get into the life stages that this insect really is going to impact many aspects of human life and our activities. It is considered an agriculture pest, primarily, and of greatest concern are wine grapes. Our wine grape industry is most at risk with this insect. In Pennsylvania, they have even reported complete vine death and near entire vineyard kill after heavy feeding of spotted lanternfly. This insect will also be a forest pest, or is a forest pest. It likes species like walnut, red maple, and others in the forest setting. It also likes native wild grapevines, Virginia creeper, and other species that occur throughout the forest setting. So not only our forested areas, but our forest industry could be impacted by this insect, as well as general commerce. Again, because I mentioned the quarantines all throughout the states that are infested, and materials and vehicles that are moving out of those quarantine areas for commercial business are supposed to be inspected, self-inspected by the entities themselves after taking trainings through the state departments of ag to ensure that they're not moving spotted lanternfly or at any life stage or infested material. And then finally, spotted lanternfly is going to be a pest in the home landscape, in the backyard. They, despite their name and despite many of the photos that you see, even like the one behind me with the open wings and looking like a beautiful moth or butterfly, they are actually plant hoppers. So they are piercing, sucking insects. They're feeding on the phloem of their host plant, the sap, drinking the sap out of the plant. And with these species of piercing, sucking insects, much like aphids and scale, you end up with the production of honeydew. So that, coupled with the insects, make them a home pest and a backyard nuisance as well. So a little bit about the insect itself and looking at its various life stages. The first 3 juvenile stages, first instar, second instar, and third instar stage, are this black insect with white spots. You can see really they look very similar in all of these 3 stages, just a slight difference in size. The first instar that hatches out from the egg masses in late April, early May is the time of arrival for that first juvenile stage. They are quite small at about 4 millimeters in size. Growing over the next few weeks, maturing into the second and then third instar juvenile stages. You'll notice all 3 of these have that head projection, which is noted by the red arrow. They sit much like a frog does, and kind of their hind end down, head up, and ready to jump a pretty good distance. I've seen these stages jump from a complete standstill at least 6 or 8 feet. So they can jump quite well, and will scatter as you walk among them, or brush along foliage that has them in it. This is a few photos to show you what these young stages look like, and as they're feeding, they certainly can aggregate in pretty high numbers. They primarily will feed on the young, tender, growing terminals, shoot tips of plants in these young life stages. On the left is a wild grape. On the right is tree of heaven. And you can see them, again, they're just feeding away in both of these photos. The 4th juvenile stage is shown here. They're much larger, nearly a ½ inch in size, and of greatest note, they pick up bright red coloration at this 4th instar. And this is the stage that really likes black walnut for some reason. We find them feeding heavily in the 4th instar stage on black walnut. Again, you still see that same head projection. They still jump quite well, and do not yet fly in the 4th instar stage. Just another photo showing one sitting on a grape leaf here in Frederick County. Here's a photo showing mostly 4th instar nymphs on the left on Tree of Heaven. You'll also note a few of the black and white 3rd instar, maybe a 2nd instar in there still. So you'll get some variation in the stages you're seeing as they progress throughout the season. The 4th instars are typically showing up mid-June and mid to late June, and then molting into adults. I'll show you some more adult photos in early to mid-July. The photo to the right there is a 4th instar emerging. That's the cast skin of the black and white nymph. It's emerging out of that, shedding that exoskeleton, and then it will darken up and color as it dries out a little bit. But the head projection, when it first molts like that, is that bright yellow coloration, a bit odd looking, and almost shrimp-like in its appearance at that time. A few more photos on the left. Again, a photo on Tree of Heaven. I believe we've got a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 4th instar nymph shown there. On the right is a 3rd, 4th, and an adult on Tree of Heaven. Here they are feeding mostly 4th instars feeding on black walnut. and you can see how heavy they start to feed on some of the twigs. The fourth instar stage is when they start feeding more on woody material in and on plants, and you can see they're feeding heavy enough that they're starting to impact the foliage at the tip of that limb. Where to find spotted lanternflies. So I've mentioned that they primarily like Tree of Heaven. If they would only stay with Tree of Heaven, I think we'd all be in much better shape. Unfortunately, they are known to feed. A recent publication came out in the last few months, updating with many of the North American host species that have been found. We had been saying 70 species. We're now over 100 known species that they will feed on. And a few things noted here. On the left, you've got poison ivy. There is a small black and white nymph there on that shoot. In the center is a bush honeysuckle. And on the right, again, Tree of Heaven. You will find spotted lanternfly really on almost any vegetation in and around Tree of Heaven. This young stage is really feeding on that young tender growth. And as I said, the fourth instar, the bright red ones, are the ones that start feeding through more woody material. The adults show up in July, quite large for an insect, nearly an inch in size from head to tip of wing. When the wings are spread open, you've got 1.5 to 2 inches or so from wingtip to wingtip. And this is the only life stage that can fly. They still are fantastic hoppers all throughout their life cycles. Moving on, I failed to update this. As I mentioned, 70 host plants, now known to be over 100. The photo doesn't show up so well, but the Tree of Heaven there on the left, the limbs are just completely covered with adult lanternflies. The center is a single lanternfly feeding on Tree of Heaven. And to the right is a black walnut. Again, you can see a fairly young black walnut that's showing dieback from heavy feeding. And then this is usually the shock and awe slide and photo. These are adults in several different situations. They have the ability to aggregate and feed in very high numbers. Pennsylvania has done some studies and alluded to dropping over 10,000 adults out of a single silver maple after treating it with insecticides. So that level of infestation is not fun to deal with, not pleasant with all the honeydew, and not accepted by most homeowners. On the left, that is in the residential situation. That is an ornamental cherry tree that all of those adults are attracted to and feeding on. Certainly excreting honeydew everywhere, not a pleasant situation for your kids to play or swing, etc. Top right, they are feeding on wine grapes in Pennsylvania. They do not feed on the fruit. They feed on the vines or on the branches of whatever their host plant is. Bottom right is another photo on Tree of Heaven. This is a photo, or actually a short video I'm going to play showing the honeydew rain that can occur in a heavy population. The trees there to the right, some with English ivy growing on them, are Tree of Heaven. So this is the backyard residence of a citizen here in Winchester. And I took this video last fall about this same time frame. nearly exactly a year ago. And watch against the fence, you'll see honeydew just raining down out of the tree. All of those drips catching the light, the sunlight, are honeydew waste from spotted lanternflies up in the canopy of that tree. I'll play this another time or two just to give you the chance to see that. But I have played this enough. I've counted over 10 streams of honeydew at the same time coming down out of those trees. So when I'm surveying areas and doing different data collection, I'm always cleaning my glasses and getting honeydew dripped all over me. That honeydew, if you're not familiar with other piercing sucking insects, that honeydew is their waste. It is a sugary liquid substance that they're ejecting out as their poop. So that starts to cover everything: the forest floor, the yard, a deck, a patio, potentially a vehicle sitting in a driveway if the tree above it is heavily infested. And over time, sooty mold begins to grow on that sweet, sticky, sugary mess. Sooty mold is just a fungal growth. The black coloration that you're seeing in these photos is sooty mold. It will grow on the leaves or the trunks or even the ground underneath. And it in and of itself does not harm the host plant. It's just feeding on the sugars in the waste from the lanternflies. But especially for like the vineyard situation, and we've seen it even on the forest floor in Pennsylvania, when you get heavy coatings of honeydew and heavy coatings of sooty mold, you're starting to reduce photosynthesis and the ability for that plant to feed itself. So reduce production in wine grapes, and reduction and even death of plants on the forest floor under these heavy populations. Also noted here on this slide, the far bottom right, you can start to see, and on that tree of heaven on the right, you see some white fungal growth starting to occur. It's basically a yeast that's growing on the fermenting honeydew and oozing sap. I know this photo to the left is poor quality. I apologize for that, but you can see lots of that white yeast fermenting honeydew and sap at the base of this tree. The red circles in that photo are honeybees and bumblebees. This is the backyard of a resident here in Winchester. Last year, she reached out to local beekeepers saying she had a honeybee swarm in her tree. The beekeeper came out and said, after observing this tree, said, "No, ma'am, you do have hundreds of honeybees coming to this tree, as well as bumblebees and yellow jackets and others, but you have a lanternfly infestation, and they're coming to the lanternfly infestation." So this is what happens. You get ants, bees, wasps, hornets attracted to the honeydew and oozing sap. Not really a pleasant situation in a small backyard with young kids and dogs and cats running around, but this was unfortunately their situation. To the right, again, another photo. I took this up in Pennsylvania in 2018, but just to show some fourth instars and adults, and you'll notice the yellow jacket, they're visiting them as well to feed on the honeydew. The egg masses are laid by the adults. Again, we start seeing adults in July, so there's quite a long time that the adults are feeding in the ecosystem. From July till mid-September is when we start seeing mating, or courtship and mating and egg laying, as noted there. Here in Virginia, right at mid-September the past 3 years. The egg masses are the life stage that will overwinter and provide us the next year's population of spotted lanternfly. The twig in the center, a fairly small twig for an egg mass to be on, but we've seen them on twigs as small as even pencil size. But that is a black locust twig that female lanternfly had laid egg masses on. A few more photos of egg masses, new and old, and not all on plant material. They will primarily lay on the underside of horizontal branches. And as the population grows and you have heavier numbers, you'll see them more and more down on the trunks of the tree and really anything in and around the area. So piece of concrete there on the left with the penny that was in a prime location, had 5 eggs deposited. Top right is an old egg mass from the previous year from when the photo was taken. They had emerged, but still clinging on to the tree even late into the current season. Bottom right is an old abandoned tractor trailer. They seem to like rusty metal for some reason to lay egg masses on. And again, this brings up the threat of human movement of this insect. And if this is if an egg mass is deposited on a vehicle or possibly a trailer, an ATV, a hunting blind, anything, a backyard grill, patio equipment that is outside during the fall of the year when eggs are being laid, it may have lanternfly egg masses on it. It should be inspected, and those should be crushed or removed before moving those objects. Some more photos of egg masses, because those really are the most difficult to identify. The insect itself is large, especially the 4th instar and the adults. They're large enough, their coloration is unique enough that they're pretty easy to identify. We see really good identification from the general public of this insect. These are egg masses on the underside of a cherry branch. Again, where I typically will first look is on the underside of horizontal branches like that. Quite a few more egg masses, just showing the differences. When they're first laid, the female will lay eggs in rows. You can kind of see that in the photo there on the bottom left. You see 4 or 5 rows there of eggs. Approximately 20 to 30 eggs per egg mass. We believe a female can lay 2 to 3 egg masses in her lifetime. And then she will coat them typically with a coating over the rows of eggs. And that coating looks almost like a mud smear, an inch or so wide by an inch and a half or 2 inches long. And sometimes the female will get scared off, we believe, or she may run out of that coating later in her life, and you will sometimes find naked eggs or eggs that are deposited and don't have that coating over them. Again, a few more photos of eggs just to show color variation. They're bright white when she first puts that coating on them, and as they dry in the first 12 to 24 hours, they're quite shiny, but an off-white, tan, gray coloration, and they will continue to darken and dry out and lose that sheen as the season progresses. I've noted that they don't lay just on plant material. Here are some non-plant egg sites that we've observed. Buildings, again, electric meters, construction trailers, anything left outside during the September to November timeframe is at risk for an egg mass. This just shows you weathering of an egg mass up in Pennsylvania in 2015. There you see some of those naked eggs where the adult female did not get the entire egg mass completely covered. We're trying to keep record of noted host plants that we've seen them on here in Virginia. You can see a wide range of host plants. The E is noting where an egg mass has been found, or some of those will note egg mass only, but really a wide range of species. Again, forest species, natives, non-natives, home ornamentals, landscape, shade trees, all the above are listed here. I will say to date here in Virginia, we're fortunate we have not dealt with this pest really as an ag pest yet. It has shown up primarily in industrial and residential areas in Winchester and Frederick County, and just now starting to find it really in the surrounding edges and border rows of like fence rows of some of our orchards, and have not yet picked them up feeding on grape in a vineyard, although Doug Pfeiffer, our fruit entomologist from Blacksburg at Virginia Tech, just found the first adult spotted lanternfly at a vineyard site here in Frederick County. So we're continuing to watch the vineyard and orchard sites and see what risk this will play out. At Virginia Tech and Virginia Cooperative Extension, we've pulled together a host of resources. Pennsylvania, Penn State Extension, and Pennsylvania Department of Ag have been very helpful throughout this whole ordeal and sharing their resources and materials as we develop ours as well. If you do an online search for spotted lanternfly Virginia, you'll come up with our main VCE site. It's noted here on this slide. There's also an email address there, spottedlanternflyvirginia@gmail.com. That email goes to Eric Day in our insect ID lab at Virginia Tech, and he is a great resource in all of these efforts, as I mentioned earlier. We have some identification cards, wallet cards. If you are looking for resources for your events, PRISM events or other educational community events that some of you may be involved with, we have lots of resources. Feel free to reach out to either myself or Eric Day, and we're happy to get you some of these resources. Here in Winchester and Frederick County, we've really started to switch gears in citizens reporting and calling in about this pest. We're now at a point where we're giving them management resources and advice. And this is from our Home and Grounds Pest Management Guide. Some of the pesticides that are labeled and effective for spotted lanternfly in the home landscape. Residential fact sheet, again, going into dealing with this pest in numerous management approaches, really at all life stages, is what it's going to take, because again, with high aggregation levels and the ability to feed on over 100 species in the landscape or the environment, if you treat a property, the likelihood is they will reinfest from surrounding areas pretty quickly. We're asking people to report findings of this insect. Even here in Winchester and Frederick County all year, we've had people reporting. We've gotten to a point where we consider Winchester city limits, all properties within Winchester, generally infested, and are asking residents there not to report unless they're seeing over 50 adults at one time on a property, so that we can monitor heavier population areas. And Frederick County, we're still watching it spread. Clark County, we certainly want to know about findings there. And then elsewhere throughout Virginia, if you happen to see this, please report. This is an online portal through e-extension, Ask an Expert. We've got it on most of our resources as an opportunity to report to us. I've mentioned the quarantine, and this is a resource that Virginia Department of Ag has put together for best management practices with businesses. Again, commercial entities within Winchester and Frederick County are supposed to go through a training so that they can self-inspect and get a permit from Virginia Department of Ag to move goods outside of Winchester or Frederick County, just because of the threat of moving this pest around. We've also been involved throughout the state with some volunteer banding or volunteer detection programs. The first 2 years, 2018 and 2019, we used these sticky bands to trap nymphs or look for nymphs as they crawl back up the tree. They will oftentimes jump out of the tree canopy or fall down or be chased out by a predator, and then have to reclimb the trunk. And it's fairly easy to detect a small nymphal population in an area with these sticky bands wrapped around tree of heaven. We're shifting away from these, or if we're using them, recommending protection around them, because a lot of bycatch will get caught in these. A lot of unintended insects will get caught on here, even small mammals, reptiles, birds can get caught on this. So we're switching most of this to a circle trap, and I'll show a photo of that later. We have some great modules online that are resources for our volunteers, and if anyone here is interested in assisting with this, we're happy to expand those efforts. But this year, because of COVID, we didn't meet in person for trainings and offered some recorded online modules. There's actually a series of 5 of those. Again, Dr. Tree Dellinger put these together over the COVID timeframe of having to revamp and retool how we do things. Here you see some nymphs on the base or the bottom edge of a sticky band, getting stuck as they travel back up that tree. Some of the fourth instars on a sticky band. And this is the circle trap that we're largely switching to. USDA efforts have been using it as well in the area. And it's basically a wire mesh that funnels them up into a container at the top, and you capture them quite easily as they travel back up the tree. That reporting has been going into a portal. It's an ArcGIS Survey 123 program that we're using, originally developed for gypsy moth work, that some Virginia Tech folks were using, and we've retooled it for spotted lanternfly. And this is a screenshot showing the whole state and where we've had volunteers looking for spotted lanternfly throughout the state. Some of the current research that's happening here in Winchester and Frederick County, again, since we're the only known detection area in the state, all of the research is happening here, or some on campus at Virginia Tech in quarantine labs. Quite a few folks are working at different things, and I'm certainly not going to be able to mention them all here in this time frame. But the photo in the top left with the caged potted trees is an efficacy trial, an insecticide trial that Tracy Lesky's team was doing. She is the director and entomologist at the Appalachian Fruit Research Station in Kearneysville, West Virginia, which is really just within 30 minutes north of our location here in Winchester, a USDA ARS facility. And so her team has been in the area daily doing numerous projects. The modified circle traps here and the other photos are some of the Lesky team's traps. The one on the post to the right there, they have been trying out some different attractants and lures, trying to figure out what these bugs are queuing in on to congregate together, and not having much success yet. The photo in the bottom left is actually Eric Day inspecting one of these traps with a team of agents, extension agents from North Carolina State University. That actually occurred yesterday, and a current photo of some of our outreach work to train others and our colleagues and peers on this insect before it reaches their region. Some more research happening. The blue tarp shows an efficacy trial, a treated tree. Again, insecticides have been applied to tree of heaven, various products and differing methods, and we're counting dead adults that fall onto that blue tarp weekly. In the center is the orange flag notes the edge of a plot, but for 2 years, a host plant study has been done in the area. And on the far right, actually a researcher from Westchester University has been studying honeydew and its production, and how far out from the canopy or the tree trunk under the canopy is honeydew being produced. This is kind of our slogan slide, and I've got a poster of this behind me actually. And switching gears real quick, just wanted to get into tree of heaven a little bit, since that's the primary host, and again, an invasive weed species from China that is well established all throughout our area. Here are a few photos of females and their seed pods or samaras. Can be lime green to this pinkish orangish coloration shown here. Here they are, some younger shoots coming up. The top right photo shows them emerging in the spring. The new foliage often has that burgundy or maroon coloration, and is quite easy to distinguish as they're first emerging in the spring. One of the telltale signs of recognizing tree of heaven is and distinguishing it from some of the other lookalikes, other pinnately compound leaf trees. So there you see a single leaf in that drawing in the top right with its leaflets. And if you look on the underside of the leaflets, right at the base, you will see the pores on the underside, either side there of those very small lobes at the base of that leaflet. Some of the bark characteristics, large bud scars is a characteristic of tree of heaven, especially on younger wood. The left, you can see the lenticels as well as some of the bud scars. Or leaf scars. To the right is more mature bark. It gets a very reptilian look, almost I would describe it as alligator-like in its look. And some more photos of tree of heaven in bloom and seed pods. Would note that they occur as male and female trees, so management of tree of heaven, and looking forward to management potentially for spotted lanternfly. We encourage landowners to reduce the number of tree of heaven, working towards elimination of it on your property, but start with the females, because they're the ones producing all the seeds and the next batch of new seedlings. Here is some sumac that a lot of folks can confuse that or look alike with tree of heaven. Note that the leaflets here are serrated, and the seed pods are quite different. This is a staghorn sumac, has very hairy stems. Comparing seed pods here, left tree of heaven, right sumac. In our region here in the northern part of the state, northern Shenandoah Valley, many of of the residents will call tree of heaven sumac, so it can become quite you have to speak a little bit and distinguish which you're talking about, but you can certainly see the where the confusion can happen. This is a lookalike page that Rachel Brooks has put together, available as an extension publication, showing some of these pinnately compound leaves, but black walnut is another. And it too has serrated leaf edges, whereas the tree of heaven the leaf edges are entire or smooth, other than some very small lobes at the base of the leaflets. You'll note too that tree of heaven at the end of that leaf has an end leaflet, where it has black walnut will not. And here is that publication. It's available front side as black and white drawings, the back side in color. Can be quite handy. Just real quick on Tree of Heaven management. I know you all at PRISM have a fantastic fact sheet on Tree of Heaven and management options. Virginia Department of Forestry also has this resource, which I go to quite often for the various management options and time of year, especially for the various chemical options down there for cut stump and hack and squirt and basal bark, and when those should actually occur. This time of year, late fall, early winter, is a difficult time to get success with those chemical options. And again, just as a warning, we always caution people not to go out and just randomly start cutting down, mowing off tree of heaven, because as many of you I think are likely aware, it will aggressively resprout from the cut stump and the entire root system, and you will just turn a small problem into a significant problem very quickly. Looking at the big picture of tree of heaven throughout the US, shown on the map to the left is a county level map showing where tree of heaven exists. To the right is a recent study that was done to show suitability of spotted lanternfly in the United States. So you can see here, much of Virginia is quite suitable, medium to high, and unfortunately, we expect this to be quite a major pest here in the Mid-Atlantic. Looking forward, really, biocontrol is probably going to be one of the options needed to keep this pest in check. There is two parasitoid wasp species native to Asia that feed or parasitize. One parasitizes the egg mass, as shown here, the Anastatis orientalis wasp, and you can see how small it is. You can see on the photo labeled B there, and that black arrow, it has that's an adult wasp beside a spotted lanternfly egg mass, and just very small. They're not known to be here in North America. They are being studied in quarantine labs by USDA, and that's certainly a multi-year, possibly decade-long process to study that and its potential impact before it could even be approved or considered for rearing and release. Another biocontrol option that is out there, and this made news quite a bit after the 2018 season, a wet year all throughout the Mid-Atlantic. Pennsylvania saw actually two species, naturally occurring species of fungus, entomopathogenic fungus, this one being Bavaria, and Cornell and Penn State have been studying these. We've seen a few insects, spotted lanternfly, show up with Bavaria on them here in the Frederick County, Virginia area. This Bavaria as a biocontrol is actually available as a commercial biopesticide already. And so it's being utilized and tested in some of the efficacy work as well. So again, the signature slide, and with that, I'll put my email address back up there and open it up to questions.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. I learned a lot about spotted lanternfly. We have a couple of questions, but I wanted to ask a question first. The the 1 through 3 instars, they're really small and they seem difficult to see. Are there any insects that are lookalikes to spotted lanternfly at that life stage?
There certainly are. We have another fact sheet for the nymphal stages with some other lookalikes, things like bark lice and a few others may be confused. The 4th instar, the one that picks up the red coloration, can often be confused with box elder bug. So bark lice and box elder bug are probably the two that we get it confused or see people confusing it with the most, those nymphal stages.
Okay, thank you. We had a question from Susan, and she says, I'm all for getting rid of Tree of Heaven, of course, but given that spotted lanternflies can feed on some 100 species, will the removal of Tree of Heaven make a difference at this point at reducing or even stopping the spread?
Tree of Heaven is still certainly, removal of Tree of Heaven is still certainly our recommendation, and further work is needed. And this group that's here as speakers met a few days ago, and we were talking about the same question, really. And that data and research is not fully understood. How, if Tree of Heaven is removed from the landscape or the ecosystem on broad scale, what's the ability of spotted lanternfly to still penetrate a forest or occur in that landscape? I'm not sure that we fully understand that yet. It had been originally thought that Tree of Heaven was required or an obligate for spotted lanternfly to complete its life cycle. We're seeing some work by several researchers that are able to rear them in lab settings on species throughout their life cycle other than Tree of Heaven. So how successful they will be without Tree of Heaven is not yet known, but it is possible.
Mhm. And a related question, if Tree of Heaven were to be completely removed, what would happen to the native trees? Um, would there be more damage to them without Tree of Heaven?
Yeah, another great question that unfortunately we just don't have the data for yet. We see lanternfly moving throughout the season from various species, host species, and much wider host range in their younger nymphal stages. They, as I alluded to, cue in to black walnut on that 4th nymphal stage, and Tree of Heaven, really come back to Tree of Heaven quite heavily at that stage and as adults. And this time of year, as Tree of Heaven is senescing and losing its leaves, we see them probably even more than on Tree of Heaven. We see them on red and silver maple. We see them on grapevines. We see them on on Virginia creeper. So yeah, if Tree of Heaven is completely out of that mix in the ecosystem, we unfortunately just don't know yet.
I just don't know. Yeah. Okay. We have a few more questions. We have 5 more minutes for questions. So we have a question. Are there birds that will feed on these insects?
Another great question. So they may learn to. It's not since it's not a native species, it's not instinctual for most of our birds to feed on them. They're giving off that that bright orange underwing coloration, which is typically shown as a predatory defense
Mhm.
to scare away predators. So it's going to take some time, but we're in hopes that birds will learn to feed on them. There are some folks in Pennsylvania doing that very research and asking for any reports of bird feeding sightings to be reported. So
Mhm.
I personally have not seen a bird eat an adult spotted lanternfly. I have seen sticky tapes that had just had the legs of a nymph remaining on the tree, on the band. So I'm assuming a bird, something else predated on that, but I think it will happen. Again, data's just not out there yet. It's a
Yeah.
new species. We have so much to learn.
Yeah. It seemed, I mean, it seems like if they're feeding primarily on Tree of Heaven, I mean, I wonder if it would even make the birds sick if they were to eat the instars or the adults.
Uh,
We just don't know yet.
yeah, we don't.
Yeah. Okay. We have, well, Carolyn had a question about these insects, and she wants to know if they sting or bite people.
Great question, Carolyn. And thankfully, if there's any plus to this insect, it does not seek your home intentionally as an overwintering site like brown marmorated stink bug or the Asian ladybugs are right now. And it does not sting, it does not bite. So handling them is quite safe.
That's good. I have a hard time like squishing the brown stink bugs, and I was thinking about the spotted lanternfly, and I saw your slide, you know, squish them, stomp them. I'm like, I don't know if I can do that, but I'm gonna have to learn. But, okay,
Thankfully, they don't stink
okay,
when they're crushed like the brown marmorated stink bug.
they just seem really juicy. So, ooh,
They
um,
can be.
okay, we have a couple more minutes. We have a question from Emily, and she asked if there is an alert or database that like a citizen scientist could put in sightings. I know you provided some email and contact information, but is there a repository someone could use?
Reporting through that e-extension portal is what we have right now, or emailing myself or Eric Day. It, that that's where we are putting it into that database that I showed some of the screenshots of the maps,
Mhm.
and we've given access to Virginia Department of Ag and USDA team that's working here in Virginia access to that so that they can continue to watch the reports that we're getting in kind of on the perimeters and any new findings that are reported. And as I mentioned in the presentation there, other than the two that had shown up on that New York IPM map, the two counties that had shown some transportation intercepts, there have been other reports that have come in from our portal. To date, Virginia Department of Ag has investigated those, or is continuing to investigate, and has not yet found a breeding established population outside of Winchester, Frederick County, and Clark.
Okay. And then I think we have time for one final question from Laura, and she asked, are the Clark locations primarily in the valley nearest to the boundary with Frederick? I think I saw one black dot that appeared to be possibly along Route 601 on the eastern boundary.
Good. The black dots are not positive. It's only the pink dots that are positive. So sorry for not clarifying that when I showed that slide. And that is correct. The primarily the infestation in Clark has been along the western border of Clark, the western edge of Clark, where it borders Frederick County along a Peckin Creek. Now, 2 weeks ago, I saw two adults in downtown Berryville, reported that to Department of Ag. They've surveyed the area, and so we do have a small breeding population in downtown Berryville, which is in the center of Clark County, along First Street and the railroad tracks that pass through that area.
Okay. Well, we are at 2:30, so that wraps up our time with Mark. So I'll go ahead and let you unshare your screen, Mark. And thank you very much for being with us today and giving us the down and dirty about spotted lanternfly. And please keep your eyes out, folks, and report this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Okay, and if we didn't get to your question, if we have time at the end, we'll open it back up for additional questions. So our next speaker today is Caitlin DeWitt. And Caitlin, if you could go ahead and get set up, and I'll give you a little introduction. Caitlin has been the Forest Health Specialist for the Virginia Department of Forestry since 2016 and holds a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resources and Forestry from NC State University and a Master's in Entomology from Virginia Tech. She will talk about forest health pests, how to identify and control them, and will share with us some work that she has been doing using goats for invasive plant control. So I will turn it over to you, Caitlin. And as you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A box. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Caitlin DeWitt. I'm the Forest Health Specialist with the Virginia Department of Forestry. I'm going to give you a quick forest health update and just kind of piggyback off of the doom and gloom that Mark started. A lot of times, Lori, who's the Forest Health Program Manager, she and I joke that we just talk about doom and gloom. So I thought that at least at the end of this presentation, I could end it with some cute pictures of goats and maybe end on a positive note. But so the Forest Health Program with the Department of Forestry is a program of two. It's Lori and myself. We have statewide responsibilities. Here's our contact information. I'll flash it at the end as well. A lot of people ask what the Department of Forestry's Forest Health Program does. And we do a lot of things. It's kind of all encompassing, and having statewide responsibilities means it's something different all the time. But really what we do can be broken down into four large categories. The first is monitoring and surveying. So there's one of those circle traps that Mark was just talking about. We helped monitor spotted lanternfly in Albemarle and Nelson counties this year. We also trap for other native and invasive pests like the southern pine beetle, emerald ash borer, laurel wilt disease, those sorts of things. And we do aerial and ground surveys for disturbances when they pop up. So this is the bottom picture is an old outbreak of southern pine beetle on the eastern shore. We were just mapping mortality among the pines there. We do a lot of integrated pest management. So this is a combination of chemical, biological, and cultural control methods. So we treat for pests such as the emerald ash borer, hemlock woolly adelgid, invasive plants, that sort of thing. We also have some biological control programs that we're working on for hemlock woolly adelgid and the emerald ash borer. And we also promote good cultural forest practices like thinning your pine trees to help prevent against southern pine beetle, just good forest practices to help against declines, that sort of thing. We offer technical assistance to both our field staff within the Department of Forestry and landowners and other natural resource managers within the state. This comes through field visits if anybody's got an issue going on with some of their trees or their stand of trees. And it includes trainings of our field staff to help them stay up to date with some of the more relevant and timely issues. So this picture at the bottom is actually in Winchester at one of the sites where we are showing some of our foresters about spotted lanternfly. Eric Day's in there, he's beside me at the bottom, and trees back there behind him too. But we just like to help educate our staff so that when they're interacting with landowners, they can also know what's going on in the forest and forest health. Finally, we do a lot of resource assessment, GIS, and data collection. So anytime we have an outbreak or with our trapping, we'll put that into maps. We create relevant publications and we publish on the VADOF blog, or we send it out to our foresters. And then also everything that we do in a field season, we have to send up to the U.S. Forest Service because they capture all of the information that goes on state wide, and keep track of everything going on across the country forest health related. So everything that we do in Virginia eventually does go to, for us, Atlanta, which is where the Southern Research Station is, or the Southern Station is, and we kind of just let everybody know what's going on. Gonna start off with the emerald ash borer, kind of giving a quick background about that and what we've been doing, what you can do for ash trees in your yard. The emerald ash borer, for those of you that are not familiar with it, it's native to Asia. It gets its name because it's this beautiful metallic green beetle up here at the upper image. They are not very large. They're 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch long. And you can see by that picture of the penny, they're very, very small. The larvae are the damaging agent, and they feed throughout the winter. They bore into the bark and they tunnel and the phloem tissue. So they're effectively girdling the tree as they feed beneath the bark. The adults really don't cause much damage. They're only out for a short period of time in the spring, basically to fly and mate. And then they lay their eggs on the outer bark, and the larvae then tunnel into the tree, and then, you know, feed that way, kind of disrupting the flow of water and nutrients within the tree. Some of the signs of emerald ash borer are on this image on the left. These are the larval galleries. So if you peel the bark back, you can actually see the tunnels made by the emerald ash borer as they feed. So they make these winding S-shaped galleries. And if you start down here, you can see this is where the first instar emerald ash borer went in and started feeding. And then they gradually get bigger and bigger as they go through their larval instars. And eventually you can see this is the D-shaped exit hole of where the adult emerged from that one larval insect. The D-shaped holes, like this image in the middle, this is what happens when the adults leave the tree and fly and mate and reproduce. This is a good sign of emerald ash borer in your ash tree, but it can be very hard to see. So it's not always like a definitive way to tell if your tree has emerald ash borer or not. If trees are large and have thick bark, and sometimes it's hard to determine. Sometimes they don't come out right on the bark plate like that. Sometimes it might be in between the bark wedges. So you might not always see the D-shaped exit holes. And then also you can see on this image on the right, some epicormic sprouting. This is a tree's response to stress, where they start to put out shoots of leaves in areas where they might not normally put out shoots. So you might see it all up and down the main trunk when there's no other branches. The tree is recognizing that there's an issue. They're not getting as much of the water up to the top of the tree, so they're having some crown decline. And because of that, they just put out these shoots to try and get some foliage out to help photosynthesize, recognizing that there's something going on. By far and large, I find that this is the most common tell sign that there's an emerald ash borer problem within an ash tree. This is called woodpecker stripping, also called blonding. And what happens is the woodpeckers really like to eat those larvae as they're feeding under the bark. They find that they're really nice, tasty little morsels, and oftentimes in heavy populations, there's a ton of them under the bark feeding. And so the woodpecker will actually strip away the bark to try and make it easier for them to get into the tree and access those larvae. So you'll see driving up and down the road, especially up in Northern Virginia areas, or even starting to happen around here in Albemarle County where I am, areas that have been infested and have high populations of emerald ash borer. You'll see the blonding along the side of roads or on properties. And really that's a good way to say, okay, there's something wrong with that tree. If it's an ash, it's emerald ash borer, unfortunately. This is the most up-to-date map of emerald ash borer in the United States. So all of this green represents the native range of the ash species that we have in North America, and the red are county detections of emerald ash borer. And so the emerald ash borer initiated its start in America in the early 2000s up in Michigan. They suspect it came over on some imported wood packaging material. And since the early 2000s, you can see that it's made its way down to Georgia, Eastern Texas, Northern Louisiana. It's all the way up in the very tip of Maine, bordering Canada. And even a detection way out in Colorado, that's actually in Boulder, and they traced that detection to some imported stock that they brought over from Michigan, actually. So really, in about 20 years, there's been a big move in this pest when the insect itself doesn't actually fly that well. The adults are pretty poor flyers, can only fly a couple miles on their own. So they're not moving a lot on their own. A lot of this is human-mediated movement of wood material. So since the larvae like to go under the bark in that wood material and feed, they're easily moved when people notice that they have a dying tree and they cut that tree down. And then they say, oh, I'm going to go camp down in North Carolina this weekend, so I'll just take some firewood with me. And then they've moved unknowingly emerald ash borer larvae from, Virginia or wherever they are down to North Carolina where it might not be present yet. And then they've got movement that way. Also other wood packing material that hasn't been treated. So really it's because of us that it's moved so far, unfortunately. But because of this, the IUCN has listed all of our native ash species as critically endangered. In Virginia, we have 6 native ash species. We have Carolina, blue, black, pumpkin, green, white. I think that's 6. But so all of ours are threatened, and we have found emerald ash borer in all of the native species of ash in Virginia, unfortunately. So in Virginia, this is the map of confirmed counties where we've found emerald ash borer. And when I say confirmed, I mean that we have physically found either a larvae or an adult of the emerald ash borer and sent it to Eric Day for his official confirmation and record keeping. You can see that really the only part of the state that hasn't been confirmed is like southeastern Virginia. We suspect it's there. We just haven't physically found a specimen yet. So we're focusing a lot of efforts in trying to determine whether or not, there are ash that have the emerald ash borer in it. But the story for EAB in Virginia is that it was detected in Northern Virginia up in 2008. Since then, it made a big jump from Northern Virginia down to Southside in 2012. And then we've basically just been filling in the counties since then. Again, since we had to find an actual insect, we had to find symptomatic trees to confirm them. So even though a county might say it was confirmed in 2017, chances are that emerald ash borer was there a few years before, just with the delay in time where an insect is feeding and then starts to cause damage that's noticeable on the outside of the tree. There is a lag time between initial feeding and mortality, usually 3 to 5 years. So we think that, it's probably been around in some of these counties a little bit earlier than when we officially confirmed it. But most of Virginia is now confirmed. And so now we're at the point where if you have an ash tree and it still looks healthy, treat it. If not, we are seeing, especially in Northern Virginia and down in Southside, Halifax, that sort of area, full mortality of ash trees that haven't been treated. And you'll just see kind of complete walls of dead ash, especially around like rivers and roadsides and areas like that where there are high populations. So I mentioned some of the options available for treatment. If you have a healthy ash tree and you have the means, please go ahead and treat it. That's your best bet. It's very effective at controlling the emerald ash borer. This image on the left, that is us doing a stem injection with imamectin benzoate, which is by far the gold standard treatment for ash trees. This is about 99% effective, and it's good for 2 to 3 years. There's also a soil drench option available, which is good for 1 year and is not quite as effective, but still better than doing nothing. It can be costly to treat for your ash tree. So that's why I say if you have the means, please go ahead and treat. But you do have to at some point weigh the treatment versus removal costs, because as these trees start to die, they become very brittle because the insect has disrupted the flow of water. And so the trees dry out effectively. And at some point, if you have an arborist come out to remove the tree, they're not going to send a climber up in the tree to help take it down. So they will have to bring in some specialized equipment to help remove it. We are also kind of working with some biological control options. So similar to what Mark was showing you for spotted lanternfly, They are wasps, but they're not harmful to humans. They're small and highly specific to emerald ash borer. So this is one of them. And it looks scary in this picture because it's zoomed in and magnified. But when I say they're not really scary, I mean it. These are the wasps in a cup. So this is Tetrasticus planopennis, which is one of the parasitoids. And all of these little black dots in that cup are the wasps. So they're very small, very specific to emerald ash borer, not harmful to humans whatsoever. And currently there are 4 that have been approved for release in the United States, 2 of which are egg parasitoids, so they go after the eggs of the emerald ash borer, and 2 are larval parasitoids, so they actually go after the larvae of the emerald ash borer. So these are kind of the main options that we've got going to help control for emerald ash borer. Department of Forestry is really undergoing a big effort right now to help protect ash trees on state lands. So we have some of the injection equipment on our own, and this year we treated 156 trees on state lands. We also recognize that because of the cost of treatment, that it can be prohibitive for landowners, and we want to ensure that there are trees on private lands that are also protected. So we received grant funding beginning 3 years ago to help set up a cost share program to help landowners, municipalities, homeowner organizations, other organizations, nonprofits treat ash that might be on their land. This past year, we helped to cost share 141 treatment projects for landowners and organizations. And in total, that was 491 trees treated on private land. So we're looking at like 600 trees that we treated this year, which isn't a ton when you think across the whole landscape, but we are pretty proud that it is better than nothing, that there are some ash trees being protected, and that hopefully we can save some trees across the landscape so that when this wave of emerald ash borer eventually slows down, because there's not as many hosts, that we can help, have seed source for the future, basically. We have been doing some biological control releases. So the USDA APHIS is in charge of this, and you have to submit sites to be approved by them. Right now, it's only on state and federal lands that you can release these agents. So this past year, we released 1,000 of the egg parasitoids, the ubius, and 1,076 of Tetrasticus, the larval parasitoid at Grayson Highlands State Park in Southwest Virginia, where they've got some rare blue ash. And then we released 500 ubius and 730 Tetrasticus at Montpelier, also this summer. We have a few other sites as well, but this is just what we did this past year, what we were approved for. This is the cost share program. If anybody has any questions, we do have 1 more year of funding guaranteed for this. So we will be opening up again next April, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about that. Or you can email me afterwards and we can talk more about that as well. I'm going to move on now to thousand cankers disease. So this is an interesting one because it's a disease complex, actually, which means that involves an insect and a pathogen that work together. So it is also interesting because it's not native to the Eastern United States, but it's also not invasive like we consider emerald ash borer or spotted lanternfly. So this is native to the Southwestern US, but problematic in the Eastern United States. And it involves this walnut twig beetle, which is the image on the top left, and this fungus, Geosmithia morbida. And it primarily impacts our black walnut trees and was confirmed in Virginia in 2011. So it's been around for about a decade now. And what happens is the walnut twig beetle, which is a very, very small beetle, it goes into the branch of a black walnut. So that little tiny pinprick that arrow is pointing to, that's the entrance hole for where the beetle went in. And the beetle actually carries the pathogen with it on a specialized chamber on its back. And the beetle going in doesn't really do much. But what happens when it goes in these tunnels and it starts going around, the spores of the Geosmithia morbida actually are wiped off of its back and disseminated along those tunnels. And it creates these fruiting bodies, which eventually cause lesions and necrotic areas on the bark. And so what happens is you get these dark areas of dead tissue where you're not able to move water or nutrients. And so the stem kind of slowly dies. And as these lesions get bigger and bigger, they coalesce and you get one whole dead area on the branch. It gets the name Thousand Cankers disease because some pathologists said it was like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So it's very slow and they all add up and eventually you have a problem. And then what happens is you start to see crown dieback, branch dieback, and then in some cases, complete death of the tree. Some of the spots that we had around the Richmond area when it was initially detected, this is what the walnuts were starting to look like. So like I said, you see some of that dieback, you see some necrosis of the branches, and then you see chlorosis on fading trees as they are starting to withdraw from movement of that water and those nutrients. And so you start to get some real scraggly looking black walnut trees, and this is very concerning. So people were initially very concerned that this meant that all of our walnuts were threatened, that we were going to have mortality across the state of all of our walnuts. So the Virginia Department of Agriculture initially confirmed where they were seeing these trees and where they were finding the walnut twig beetle and Geosmithia morbida. They were testing and trapping all over, and they put a quarantine in place for around the Richmond area and up in Northern Virginia, where they were also finding them in Fairfax and Prince William counties. This map is from 2012. It's the most up-to-date map that we have because really there have not been any other real detections outside of these quarantine areas. The Department of Agriculture and then Fairfax and Prince William counties, they continue to trap for walnut twig beetle and then send any beetles or symptomatic branch samples to a pathologist with the Department of Agriculture. They are finding small numbers of walnut twig beetles still to date, but they're not really finding any of the Geosmithia morbida. And so what everyone is thinking is that in the time when they were seeing a lot of this dieback and these symptomatic trees, it was a really big drought year in these areas. They're also highly urbanized areas, and so the trees are already under a little bit more stress initially than like some forested walnuts. And so they were thinking that this was a problem, that they were disrupting some of the nutrient movement and water movement of these branches, but the fact that it was also a drought was compounding, and that's why they were seeing a lot of that crown decline and branch mortality. And they found that some of the trees are recovering. So this is something that they're still keeping an eye on, but also is maybe not as pressing of an issue as like spotted lanternfly or emerald ash borer, where it's just moving like wildfire. I guess spotted lanternfly is not moving like wildfire, but you know, it's just expanding quickly comparatively. And so they haven't lifted the quarantines in these areas, but they're also not finding, you know, new detections that are problematic yet. So this is one everybody's still keeping an eye on and is still anxious to learn about, but really, knock on wood, hasn't become as big of a pest as we were expecting it to. This is an old map, again, 2018. It's the most recent I could find. You can see that in Virginia, they've been doing lots of trapping. And in 2018, they did not find any walnut twig beetle in the traps, and they did not find any more, you know, Geosmithia morbida. It is present in other areas in neighboring states. So Tennessee, still, they were finding it, you know, up in Maryland, I think they were finding some, and we have found some. So I don't know why we're not included, maybe not in 2018, but we did find some this past year. But it's not a problem. It's not something that people are super concerned about, but we still do want to keep an eye on. So if you find any symptomatic walnut trees, let us know, but we haven't seen anything troubling since the initial detection in the early 2011s. I'm going to move on now to a couple of pests that we have, maybe, hopefully not on the horizon, but want everybody to keep an eye out for. Laurel wilt disease. This is one that is another vascular wilt. So this is a disease that was first detected near Savannah, Georgia in 2002. It was actually detected very close to the port of Savannah, so we all know how it was brought over, and it impacts all species in the Lauraceae family. So this includes red bay, swamp bay, pond spice, sassafras, things like that. And it is a disease where, again, it's a disease complex. So it has the red bay ambrosia beetle that carries the fungal pathogen on its back. And as it goes through the tree, the fungal pathogen spreads that way and then clogs up the sapwood and disrupts the movement of water. And so that's how trees are killed from this. This is the most recent map of laurel wilt disease. And so why I say it's on the horizon, you see it's problematic and typically found along coast. A lot of Lauraceae species are coastal species, why we don't have a lot of population except really in far southeast Virginia. And so since 2002, when it was first detected, you can see it has moved. All of Florida is problematic. All of that has laurel wilt disease. And then it's moved over to East Texas, up to North Carolina. And then we have these interior jumps like Southern Arkansas and Kentucky and Tennessee. And those were all detections that were made in sassafras. And so before, everybody thought it was mainly just red bay, swamp bay, those kinds of things. But nobody really thought about sassafras until they started to find declining sassafras in some of these interior states. And it was detected that it was laurel wilt. And this is when everybody got very concerned because, you know, we thought it might be a localized problem just for these coastal species. But using sassafras, which is much more widely distributed, this is how it can move on its own pretty quickly. And so the detection in Kentucky and Tennessee pretty much came out of nowhere last summer. Nobody saw it coming. Someone just reported a stand of dead sassafras on the side of the road. And then they started to discover and delineate that it was laurel wilt disease, and probably brought over with, again, some imported wood material that had the beetles in it. We are concerned about it because we don't have a lot of the other Lauraceae families in Virginia, but we do have a lot of sassafras, especially in the mountains and Piedmont of Virginia. And we don't want it to come over and impact our sassafras. And also it's concerning because avocado plants are in the Lauraceae family, and we don't want it to move through sassafras across the country to the California and Mexico avocado plantations. So all of these are things that we are concerned about and didn't think possible until it just showed up. Because of that, we are working with a project at the U.S. Forest Service to monitor laurel wilt and sassafras. So we are trapping at 2 locations in Virginia for the red bay ambrosia beetle. This picture is kind of hard to see, but this black hanging funnel trap, that's to attract the red bay ambrosia beetle. If it's present, has a pheromone lure attached to it. So we're trapping at Falls Cape State Park down in Virginia Beach, and Sandy Bottom Nature Preserve in Hampton, Virginia. These are high populated, high risk, high visited areas that have both sassafras and red bay. And so we're concerned that way. And then we also have long-term monitoring plots for sassafras at 5 locations across Virginia, in the mountains, the Piedmont, and the coastal plain. And so those are sites that we visit each year, and we try and check for any decline in sassafras and note any sort of changes and send off samples if necessary. Luckily, we have not found any red bay ambrosia beetle in our traps for the past 2 years that we've been doing this. And our sassafras are maintaining. They don't look like they have any vascular wilt. So I think we're okay for now, but we're still very much on alert since it's in our neighboring states of North Carolina, Kentucky, and Tennessee. The next one I'm going to talk about that hopefully is not on the horizon, but is definitely something of concern in 2020 is the Asia longhorn beetle, native to Asia, as its name suggests, has a huge host list of a lot of our beautiful forest trees that we like. I'll get on that in a minute. And it was first discovered in Brooklyn in 1996. Populations also exist in Ohio, Massachusetts, and previously Illinois and also New Jersey. For a while there, they were all just staying. You know, it's been around for a long time. They figured out that eradication can be very effective. And so they were, what we thought, able to contain in these areas for a while or get rid of, like they did in Illinois and New Jersey, the populations. But because it's 2020, in June, the whole forest entomology community was on fire because it was reported that there was a population outside of Charleston, South Carolina. This was problematic because, like I mentioned, we thought that it was pretty much contained up in New England and some of the Midwestern states up north. And this was a very large jump over a lot of states where nobody had detected anything for quite some time. And the work that they've done down there to delineate and determine what's going on has found that the population down there is very established. And this was not just a one-off Asian longhorn beetle, that they have been down there for a couple of years. And so right now they're still working hard to control and then really figure out where this pest is and how long has it been there for. So very, very concerning. A lot of the southern states, Virginia included, are on alert because, like I said, it has a large host list. So these include a lot of the ones. So ash, we're already concerned about for motash borer, but this will also impact that. Birches, elms, maples, which is a big one. It loves maple trees, and we have a lot of maple trees in Virginia. Sycamore and willows, those sorts of things. So these are just some of the ones, some of the big ones that it likes. But it continues on. It's similar to spotted lanternfly, where it has a large host list. It does not really have any preference, and it's highly problematic. So I mentioned that eradication is very effective, but it's very devastating for these communities. So this is one street up in Massachusetts. The image on the left is before, when they realized they had Asian longhorn beetle, and then the image on the right is after. So all you have to do to control for Asian longhorn beetle is remove every known host species that it could like and want to be in. And so you can see how it changed the community on this one street, where they basically had a beautiful tree-lined street. And now all you're seeing are some of the evergreens that the Asian longhorn beetle won't touch. And you do this within a mile or so radius of where you have found the detection of Asian longhorn beetle. So very problematic, but effective. So we're concerned that if it got to Virginia, we would lose a number of our trees trying to control for and eradicate this. And that's something that they're working on in South Carolina right now, because it was found in an urbanized area. And people don't want to lose their trees, but also you don't want this bug to spread. So very problematic, very concerning, but it's 2020. So what else can they throw at us, right? Okay, so that was a lot of really sad and depressing things. I thought that I would end on something not bug related. It was just kind of a project that Lori and I decided we wanted to try. And since PRISM is an invasive plant group and everyone's very knowledgeable about invasive plants and controlling them, I wanted to just share kind of a case study that Lori and I worked on using goats to graze down invasive plants. So in spring of 2019, we were at one of our state forests, Lasagne State Forest in Nelson County, and we found a good area, about 4 acres in size, that we wanted to try and release goats on. We've been asked about goats as a control method for invasive plants a number of times by landowners across Virginia. A variety of reasons kind of impact this. Some people don't want to use chemicals and herbicides on their land. They, think that goats are cute and it could be fun to have them and see what was going on. And also, they know that goats eat everything, and so it could be an effective way to control. So we were able to apply for and receive some U.S. Forest Service grant funding to use as an invasive plant control project. And we reached out to a local company to do the work. And so on our 4-acre section of land, we divided it into 3 sections. I'll show that map in a second. And 90 goats were released for a total of almost 2-week period. So this was our area. It was a nice kind of wedge-shaped spot. We thought it was easy to access, that it was easy to contain. And so we chose this to be our kind of goat palooza, as we named it. We had fun with it. You have to when there's goats involved. And we basically wanted to try a couple of different treatments, because we didn't know if you just use goats, if that was a one-time thing, or if you needed to do something else follow-up wise. And so of our 3 sections, the first section, this one right here, we used goats to begin with. So all 3 sections had goats. And then after the first round of goat grazing, tongue twister, we waited a few months for things to green back up. And then we brought the goats back out and had them regraze at the end of the season. In the middle section right here, the goats grazed at the same time the other areas were grazed. And then after that, we didn't do any follow-up work because we wanted to see what happened if you just did a one-time goat grazing. How are the plants impacted? Finally, this third section up here, we had the goats graze, and then we followed up with an herbicide treatment of the remaining invasive plants and their stumps and things like that to see how that works. And so just kind of to let you guys know also, the company that we used, even though we divided the area up into set sections, he would have divided the area up into different sections and moved the fence line himself. Because he was saying that if you just put the fence around the entire area, the goats are just going to eat their favorite species. And then they're going to maybe pick over the rest. So you want to put smaller areas for them to graze in completely so that they put intensive grazing pressure on that one area and eat everything in sight. And that's what they do. So even though we divided it into sections and had them roughly about an acre in size each, he would have done a similar thing. I don't know if it would have been the same pattern or however he would have done it, but he would have also divided it up just to show that, you know, they need to put that grazing pressure on. So to show you what we were working with on why we chose this section, this is Lassane before. So this over here is Lori on the left. She's standing in basically a multiflora rose thicket. That giant plant back here is a huge multiflora rose that she was standing before, and we had to wade through that to find these plots. And it was just real gnarly to mess with and real gross, and we were torn up, and it was horrible. This is also kind of what it looked like. So you can see there's a ton of vegetation. Not all of it's bad. We had a good amount of ash regeneration and sassafras, a ton of spice bush in here as well. But it was still a pretty gnarly section that if this was your property, you wanted to manage, you know, it would be a good fit for doing something. And so this is what we started with. And then this is the goats while they were grazing. So this image on the left, you can see the fence that the goat company put up. It's electric fence to keep the goats out and keep things from going in. This over here is an area that had just been grazed, and then he hadn't moved the goats into this image on the area on the right. So you can see kind of a good before and an after. They really do eat everything. And then anything that is thick and hard for them to pull down or knock over, he will go through periodically and cut so that they can eat the vegetation at the top. And so that's what all these branches are, is where he had cut some so they could continue to eat the leaves as the rest of the plants were becoming sparse and they still needed to eat. So you do get some vegetation that's left that's a little woody and ugly looking, but really impressive to say that you started with this and then you can start and see through the forest and see, you know, the big trees that are left that are usually covered up by things. This is after the goats had left. So this is a nice little pano shot. I'm standing on where the fence line was. That's why it looks like a path. And over on the right, this is at the end of our study. So this would be right before fall, at the end of summer. We had just brought the goats back over to graze a second time. So this is where the goats had grazed and then grazed again. And so you can see it looks much reduced. And then this middle section, the goats had grazed once in early spring. And then at the end of the summer, you were starting to see a good amount of vegetation green back up. And so I just want to show like that as a good kind of the goats, 2 rounds of goats, they're effective. You will get reduced herbivory, but then also if you just have the goats and do nothing, everything will start to come back. Our herbicide plot is by far our best plot. So we did have a ton of ailanthus in this plot, and a lot of it was cut down and then used cut stump treatment to continue it, keep it from resprouting. Everything else was just spot sprayed or some hack and squirt for some of the bigger woody plants. But a lot of what we see coming back right now that's green is spice bush. There were some native trees. We had some tulip poplars coming back as well, because this was a giant tulip poplar in the stand. So most everything that we see that's green in these slides, that is native regeneration, because everything else was pretty much blasted with pesticides. The company that did the herbicide treatment for us said this was one of the easiest stands they'd worked in, because they could see where they were going. They knew what they were targeting with their herbicide treatment. And so they were pretty happy to go in and work on the spot, because it wasn't as gnarly as like starting at that one pic I showed with Lori in front of the multiflora rows. They were able to see everything they were hitting. And then also, more importantly, this area was really known for having a lot of rattlesnakes, and so they were putting their feet. They didn't have to step on any snakes while they were out there. With this project and this funding, we had a little bit of funding left that we needed to spend down. And so at another one of our state forests, Paul State Forest up in Rockingham County, we decided to bring the goats back out again. This area was interesting because it was about a 5-acre area. And it was one where some of the folks in our forest management branch here at DOF wanted to do a demo of different types of harvests. So they did one area that was clear cut, one area that was select cut, and one that was a shelter wood cut. And so the areas had been disturbed in different levels, but it was all continuous. And they were trying to see what kind of oak regeneration they were going to get. But ultimately, kind of fell through the cracks. And so the only thing that came back was nastiness. And so in the clear cut, especially, it was primarily tree of heaven, blackberry, which is not bad, but it still is painful to walk through and deal with. And then we also had a ton of like Japanese stilt grass out here and multiflora rose and some of the other ones out here. Oh, good. So you can see it was also a pretty gnarly area to go through. The goats had the time of their lives. They were eating, they were happy. And this is the after effect. So the image on the left, this was where the clear cut had been. And you can see it's very wide open right now. It looks great. The ailanthus that's still there has since been treated. We did have a contractor come in and herbicide this site as well. And so that area, we're hoping now that it's like completely start fresh, that we can really try and get some oak regeneration going. We're talking about doing a burn at this site, which initially the foresters had wanted to do, but the vegetation was actually too thick to do a burn at this site. And so we're hoping that with this, we can start fresh and actually do a real proper oak regeneration demo plot here. The image on the right has been grazed, but one thing we did find out at Paul, which we didn't really see at Lassane because we didn't have as much stilt grass out there, the goats really didn't like the stilt grass for some reason. You would think it would be an easy one for them to graze, but of all the things that they left untouched, they really didn't mess with our stilt grass. So that was something that the herbicide applicator definitely had to come back and focus on. I'm not quite sure why they didn't eat the grass, but it was just something that we noticed and we all kind of scratched our heads at. So I just wanted to share that with you guys because maybe you guys will know better why they didn't like that. I don't know if it tastes bad or whatever. And so, you know, there are pros and cons for everything in this world. For the goats, what we kind of took away from this project were the pros. It was a great way to start fresh. I call it the scorched earth approach. You know, you're going to get results and it's going to look completely different, which is very exciting to watch in a relatively short period of time, the results. Like I mentioned, it allows for a more targeted approach to herbicide treatment. So you can really see the plants that you're targeting. You know, you can really make sure that you're getting a full direct hit on the plant instead of just hoping that you're hitting it and maybe not hitting something native. Great for hard to reach areas or areas that are painful to walk through as an applicator. And then this is my favorite, the goat guy that was doing this with the company, he called it ecotainment because a lot of times he says that folks just like to have them in their yards grazing because they're cute and they're awesome to watch. And it's pretty exciting to see the results that they're doing. The cons, They do eat everything. So like I said, we had some ash regeneration that we were excited about in some of these stands, some sassafras, those sorts of things. That was all gone after the goats were there. They do eat everything. So if you have rare species or special native species that you want to protect, maybe this isn't the right solution for you to remove invasive plants on your land. They're not a silver bullet, so they're not going to come in and fix everything one shot. You are going to have to do a follow-up treatment, unfortunately. And then the final con is the cost. I think it's very prohibitive for a lot of people, unfortunately. But if you have the funds, it can be an effective way to get going. And so people ask us a lot, why is it so expensive? I will start with a disclaimer that we paid for the Gold Star treatment. So Lori and I, this was not on our land. This was at State Forest that we're an hour away from our office, and we didn't have time to really invest in going out every day. This cost can be reduced if this is on your personal land and you do some of the fence line clearing. You feed the dogs. So there are 2 guard dogs that live with the goats full time to keep away any coyotes or anything that might want to try and eat them. And so the dogs get fed once a day. So someone has to go out there and feed them. And then also while you're out there feeding the dog, you walk along the perimeter of the fence line to make sure that a branch hasn't fallen on it or, nothing has run through it while they were there. And so that costs money because we ended up paying the company to do that for us. And so the guy had to go out and do this every day. And the fence line clearing was also very expensive because you're paying for the man hours for them to go through those areas and clear the fence. So that's most of the money is in labor for that. And then, like I mentioned, on top of the goats, you are going to have to pay a follow-up treatment. So the follow-up treatment cost at Lassane was about $1,500 to treat just over an acre. Like I said, it was intensive because there was a lot of tree of heaven and they had to spend some time, but it's just the cost that you pay to really kind of finish the job off. I didn't put in here, but what we were finding, the average cost for the goats was about just under $1,000 an acre. So, if you have 1 acre that you clear with goats and then do a follow-up treatment, you're looking at about $2,500-ish if you pay for them to do everything. You could probably reduce those costs some if you do some of the work on your own. But still, it's pretty prohibitive for a lot of people, especially if you've got a large acreage stand or, you have a ton of invasives or you're fine doing some of that work yourself. So in summary, goats are effective. They eat everything, good or bad. Follow-up treatment is a must. It's a really, really great tool. That's what I like to harp on the most is it's a great tool to start fresh and to help target other treatment efforts. So if you are concerned about using chemical on your property, this is a way that you can mitigate that and use less chemical, but it can be pricey. So that's the goats. Hopefully you guys find them as cute as I did. They bring the babies out in the spring, which is also very exciting. Just gonna kind of wrap up really quickly some resources that I'd like to share with landowners and other folks. We did just put out a new forest health handbook. This is what the Forest Health and the Urban and Community Forestry program here at DOF are calling our COVID baby, because it took a pandemic for us to finally write this and get it out there. We're very proud of it, but it's on the website if anybody wants to look at it. It's got insects, diseases, and abiotic issues that are common for forest and tree disturbances in Virginia. Mark mentioned a lot about the Insect ID Lab at Virginia Tech. So that's Eric and Tree. They're wonderful. That's their website. I send a lot of people there because they've got great fact sheets on a number of insects in Virginia. And then also the Plant Disease Clinic, if you've got any sort of questions about what could be going on with any of your plants, they're a great resource as well. So in Virginia, I think we've got some good resources between Extension, Virginia Tech, DOF, FEDEX, DCR. There's a lot of great resources and we're all happy to help. The final plug, so there's some more cute goats. If you want to read more about that, Lori and I wrote about it in our Forest Health Review last year. Also found on our DOF website. This is something we put out every January, and it details all the forest health things that we dealt with the previous summer. So we're about to write the new one coming up and put that out in January 2021. But it's just kind of a fun wrap up of everything that we determined was a forest health disturbance or something cool forest health related in Virginia for last year. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions because I just threw a lot at you guys in my remaining time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, we have quite a few questions, quite a few grazing questions, but we're going to start with the Asian longhorn, actually the emerald ash borer. Our first
Okay.
question was about that. We're just going to go through them in order. And the question, let me find it. Okay. Well, is about using the pesticides to treat emerald ash borer and ash tree. Will they harm native insects that use the ash trees as the host plants?
So the safest approach would be the stem injection. That goes directly into the tree and the tree takes it up and distributes it through its tissue. So if there are any other like native wood-boring beetles that would be feeding inside the tree, there could be some non-target effects that way, but it's mostly safe because there's not a ton of others that would be in there. And if they are, they're probably bothering the tree as well. The soil drench does use imidacloprid or dinotefuran, which are neonicotinoid insecticides. And you do just kind of drench that around the base of the tree. And so if there are some other plant species close by to the root system of that tree, they could also take it up. And neonicotinoid chemicals are some of the ones that have been implicated in like pollinator decline. And so a lot of people don't like to use those, especially if they have flowering plants close by, because they could actually accidentally get some of that, taken up in their root system. It also is, you have to be careful about using it around water because it can be harmful to aquatic species as well. So, I mean, there are always trade-offs when you use these chemicals about non-target effects, but we really stand by the stem injection because it's effective for 2 to 3 years. It's the safest for applicator and non-targets because it's going directly in the tree. And it has limited, I guess, negative effects compared to the soil drench.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a question that I had as well. So I was glad someone else asked it. Okay, and now we have another question about laurel wilt. Does that affect spicebush?
That is a good question. That was something that we've asked and we haven't really determined yet because that's one that we have a lot of in Virginia as well. I think it could. I just don't think maybe we've seen it yet. But if it can impact sassafras, I don't know why it couldn't impact spicebush. I just don't know if it's been noted yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, I hope not. That's one of my favorite.
I know.
Okay, and another question about the insect pest is the Asian longhorn beetle. Is it something that bores through the center of the trees? And they recently cut down several maple trees and found holes through the center of the trunk. Or would this be caused by something else?
So it does go right into the heartwood, the larvae do. What they do, so there are some other longhorn beetles that are native to Virginia that look similar. And so it might be one of those. What they say to do for Asian longhorn beetle is it's called the pencil test. And basically the exit hole of the Asian longhorn beetle adult is exactly the size of like a pencil. And so if you can like stick a pencil all the way in and it fits perfectly and it goes all the way, it could be, but I don't want to say I doubt that it was Asian longhorn beetle because obviously it showed up in South Carolina out of the blue. But I don't know that it would necessarily be Asian longhorn beetle. Hopefully it's not.
Hopefully.
If the person that asked that question still has the tree or any of the insects, I would love to see that.
Okay. I guess maybe Jocelyn, could you maybe email Caitlin at her email address that's on the screen and maybe send her some pictures. That would be great. Okay, so now we had a few questions. Oh, Jocelyn says she does have the tree and can email photo.
Oh,
So
thanks.
let you all make that connection. Okay, and then before we start talking about goats and grazing, we did have one question about the tree health guide that you shared with everyone. Is it possible to get a hard copy of that publication?
We just got the first printing of the hard copies a couple weeks ago, and we're working on distributing those to like our field staff right now because we bought enough copies for the agency. I think there's talk about maybe getting some extras, and I don't know if we're going to sell them or give them away or what, but if you have questions, definitely like reach out and I can see if we can get some sent out to some folks.
Okay, and if you all do decide to do a publication for the public, please let PRISM know so we can share that information with our followers and maybe distribute it at some of our events too. So, okay. So now we're to the fun part of your talk. And we have about 4 minutes, so we'll try to get through as many of the grazing questions as we can. So the one question, there were a few about, okay, well, goats eat young pine trees. That's from Rod.
Oh, you know, we didn't have any young pine trees out at, both of these were, Lassane was in the Piedmont and Paul State Forest is over in the mountains. I don't know that we had any pine out there, but I imagine they would probably try and eat it. They ate most everything else. Like, I was surprised that they could eat all of the thorny plants. Like, they just chowed down on multiflora rose and blackberry, and I had no idea how they could eat like the thorns without slicing their tongue open or anything.
They love it. It's like their favorite stuff.
Yeah.
Too, that thorny stuff. They will eat.
Yeah, he calls the goat guy called it goat candy. He said that they'll prefer that at first. So
yeah. Okay, and then there were some questions about let's see, related to things that they were eat there, and we talked about this the stilt grass, like they don't like to eat stilt grass.
I don't know what that was about. We found that very strange.
Yeah, and
although Abigail's just shared that her goats do eat stilt grass.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, they're
and pine.
Good.
Yeah.
So Abigail's got hungry goats.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe these were just full on everything else. I don't know. We couldn't figure it out because that was the only thing that was left. So
I did a quick online search and I couldn't find anything that was immediately popped out. So it's an interesting question, and
might just be anecdotal for our one spot.
Who knows? Okay, and let's see. And there was a question about the another grazing question. Can you have goat grazing on large private areas in the city of Norfolk?
I mean, that would be a local government question, but I know that there's another goat company based out of like the Richmond area, and they've done a lot in like Richmond parks in the city and like along the James, where they've had goats out there in pretty urban areas. So I know they are being used in like pretty like high populated, high visited areas in like Richmond and some other localities. But
yeah, okay,
yeah.
Yeah, so check with your local government, I guess.
Yeah.
Some of them have rules against farm animals being in city limits, so.
Yeah.
Okay, and probably our final question for your segment, Caitlin, is from Deborah. And Deborah says, our rhododendron stands have collapsed. How would we know if it's due to laurel wilt? Do we remove and burn the dead stands?
I don't think that the rhododendron have been implicated in laurel wilt to my knowledge. There is something kind of going on. There's a really great Virginia Tech fact sheet about it, about rhododendron decline. It was actually written by the ladies at the plant disease clinic and some of the grad students in the plant disease department. And so that they kind of talk about a series of things like Phytophthora being an issue. I think there's a nematode that they found in those as well. And so it kind of goes through a lot of different things that are impacting some of the decline in rhododendron that we're seeing. And this was specifically along like Floyd County and like the Blue Ridge Parkway, I think is where it was. But I would look up that publication and then maybe get with some of those ladies at the plant disease clinic about what would be the best way to do control or management for it afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And so that wraps up our time with Caitlin today. Thank you very much for sharing all of the lovely insects and diseases that, you know, yeah, 2020.
Always something.
Yeah, and the goats are always a joy, and it's nice to bring a little bit of levity to some of these conversations.
It was fun to have a positive kind of thing to end on.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thanks.
And now we're gonna get ready for our final presentation today, given by Jim Hurley. And Jim, if you want to go ahead and cue up your presentation, and I will read a little bit about you to the group. And so Jim is with Blue Ridge PRISM, serving on our leadership team, and now as our vice president. He coordinates efforts to control and eradicate the wavyleaf grass. Today, he will give us an overview of the work to date and tips on how to identify, report, and control this new invasive grass in Virginia. So, Jim, I will turn it over to you.
Beth, I'm not clear that I've shared my screen successfully.
Okay, yeah, I don't see your screen. Let's see. If you go to...
I have shared screen. I've got a split screen going on.
Okay.
How about this?
Oh, yep, I think we might have it.
Do you have?
Yes, yep. We can see it, Jim. So
We
you
good?
go
Okay,
ahead
great.
and start. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. I am going to get this off the screen. Sorry, folks. Thanks for sticking with us so far. This is a bit of a marathon session, and you all have a lot of stamina to stick with us. And for the last half an hour or so, too, of the conversation, where I'm going to be speaking about wavyleaf grass. And I've gotten involved in wavyleaf grass as soon as Susan and I moved from Northern Virginia, where I am right now, actually, down to Central Virginia, to Greene County, and bought a 156-acre property on the east slope of the Blue Ridge, which is only 5 miles from ground zero of wavyleaf infestations in the state of Virginia, which is in Shenandoah National Park, right over the hill from us, about 5 miles, in West Swift Run in Shenandoah National Park. And sure enough, I began to do work on stiltgrass up in the forest in our property. I started running across small patches and little singletons of wavyleaf grass on our property. So I'm highly motivated to get involved in wavyleaf control, and have been so enthusiastically since 2015, 2016. So wavyleaf, Aplasminus undulatifolius, just thought I'd throw Latin at you there, because I love that specific epithet, which in Latin pretty much names wavy leaf itself. And it's called variably wavyleaf grass or wavyleaf basket grass. You'll see both for efficiency's sake. I tend to use the word wavyleaf rather than wavyleaf basket grass. This is what I'll be doing in the next 20 minutes or so. We'll run through identification, why it's as big an issue as it is, its distribution statewide in Shenandoah National Park, as well as in Central Virginia, where our property is. Control projects and prospects, some photos of people at work, volunteer staff, young folks, and what you can do. So I want to run through some slides of what the plant looks like. And there you go. This photo was probably taken in Shenandoah National Park in the West Swift Run drainage, where Route 33 spills out of the park on its way to Elkton. Just a typical scene for the intensity of the infestation there. Any of you who have seen infestations of and large carpets of stiltgrass will recognize this kind of a scene, which Wavyleaf will do as well. Here's another. Notice it's kind of a low, wet drainage. It's particularly happy in shade and wet. This photo was probably taken in Maryland, I believe, and shows a winter scene, probably late fall or winter scene, when the plant has senesced. So we're about to go there. So in some of the big infested sites in Virginia, that's what the scene will look like too. Here's a close-up of some leaves in a colony. Notice the very long, pointed, in botanical terms, acuminate leaf. It's a very attractive plant with this undulating foliage here, undulatifolius. Another close-up here. Notice the hairs along the stem. Notice the leaf attachment to the stem, which is an attachment rather than wrapping around or the stem going through the leaf in a perfoliate kind of way. There it is again. And a seedling. You seem to run into these frequently the year after the treatment of adults, where there may be few to no adults left behind, and a sea of these little guys. Stolons. The plant is a perennial, and so this right here is the stem that tends to run right along the surface, right under the leaf litter, or just below the surface of the soil, and rooted all along the way. And you can see how difficult it might be to remove the plant by hand if you break anywhere along the stem of the stolon and leave any root behind, which can regenerate. Another view of the stolons and multiple rootings off of nodes of the stolon itself. The hairiness of the stem and the leaf attachment again. In contrast to deer tongue, notice the strong stripiness here, not as much more vaguely undulating a leaf than Wavyleaf is. And again, the wraparound of the stem right here, notice that. Here's a comparison of Wavyleaf with Arthraxon. Wavyleaf you're going to tend to find in the forest, often in deep shade. Arthraxon you'll never find out of full sun, full to mostly sun. But we've got a number of calls and inquiries over the years about Wavyleaf being found in it, and if it's being found in an open area, it's most likely Arthraxon, could be small deer tongue. And here's another slide with a comparison of what deer tongue looks like, somewhat perfoliate here, the stem running through the leaf, and much smoother, shinier leaf too, and not as undulating as Wavyleaf is. The seeds on Wavyleaf, these are the beasts. Long, what of these things are called awns, or the hairs, the extension from the seed. And there are barbs along the awns, and there's as well a resinous, gluey type of material along the awns as well, all of which are superbly adapted or evolved for long distance transfer via fur or boots or anything that it can catch on, such as jeans. Close up of the seed. For more identification, detail, and information on control and the issues associated with Wavyleaf and why it's a big deal, go to our website at blueridgeprism.org and look onto the, I believe there's a fact sheets button, and download the fact sheet for free. So why are we so concerned? It is like bittersweet. It has the ability to travel long distances, and I mentioned bittersweet in particular. Surely there are other species that are able to do that too. But I think of bittersweet and Wavyleaf as two of the biggest threats to the eastern forest because of their ability to travel long distances in different ways, of course. Bittersweet by its berries being eaten, flown distances by birds, pooped into the middle of the forest, miles perhaps from a flowering and fruiting bittersweet vine to start a new infestation in a closed canopy. By contrast, Wavyleaf catches onto the fur of dogs, deer, bear, small mammals will move it around small distances, but bear will move it for 5 miles in a range. Deer tend to be a little bit more localized than bear in their range, but they will move it around distances too. A bear will, lie down in infestation in full seed in, let's say, August, September, come out covered with it and walk out for 5 miles, take a rest, and plant a bunch of that seed, get up and walk another 5 miles and plant another bunch of that seed. The same thing can happen with us. It gets onto boots, into treads, laces, and on pants, anything that it can stick on, and it tends to stick on most of the clothing that we wear. So I need to be really careful with seed hygiene when we're moving in and around Wavyleaf populations, particularly from August through October. So like Japanese stiltgrass, it also has the ability to carpet large areas. And so moving down to this bullet, it can thereby reduce and eliminate plant diversity, can suppress other native grasses and forbs, as well as suppress the growth of saplings of woody plants too. But unlike Japanese stiltgrass, it can thrive under dense canopy. And I've come across patches of stiltgrass under seemingly fully enclosed a wineberry shrub layer, which may not get up more than about 3 or 4 feet. And that's sitting underneath some small forest trees, sort of mid-story trees, such as redbud or dogwood, and those themselves might be canopied by full-size canopy trees too. It is remarkable the low light conditions that Wavyleaf grass is happy within. It is also like Japanese stiltgrass. Unlike Japanese stiltgrass, it's a perennial, and therefore it's more robust. And again, that means that it can penetrate through 1 to 2 inches of leaf litter in the understory, sitting on top of the soil, which Japanese stiltgrass, being an annual with a far less robust root system, is generally unable to do, and leaf litter will tend to suppress its growth, but not Wavyleaf. And so for those reasons, Wavyleaf is a particularly big threat to our forests, and particularly our forest understories. In comparison with stiltgrass, Wavyleaf has been here for just 25 years in comparison with stiltgrass's 101 years. Last year we rued rather than celebrated the 100th anniversary of the introduction of stiltgrass, as far as we know, into the United States in, I believe, Knoxville, Tennessee in 1919, and packing or crating material. Wavyleaf is believed to have first arrived, or at least it was first sighted, in the Patapsco watershed northwest of Baltimore in 1995, 1996. So I'm going to get to distribution maps. Where it is now, this is not a complete map. This is an EdMaps map with biologists as well as the general public reporting sightings of Wavyleaf on the landscape to the EdMaps or the EdMaps application. And I'll talk about that later in my time. So you can see ground zero is up here, and it's spread out from Patapsco, Baltimore area. It's going up into Pennsylvania, populations in West Virginia even now, and out into Delmarva on the peninsula. And this map is not complete for Virginia either. There are other sightings or other populations of Virginia down along the New River, another new one down in Southeast Virginia too, and other spots too. So that's the map currently, but this is the map from APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Services weed risk assessment for Wavyleaf out of the Department of Agriculture, showing the potential range for Wavyleaf. It's predicted that it could occupy some 30% of the landmass of the United States unless it is slowed down. And given its enthusiasm for the forest understory, you can see how much of the landscape is a potential target for it. You can compare that to the current stiltgrass distribution. And in 100 years, this is where stiltgrass has spread to. In 25 years, it's a relatively small targeted area compared to stiltgrass that Wavyleaf has come to occupy. But you can see roughly how similar the ranges of Wavyleaf and stiltgrass may be over time. To turn to Virginia, here is a map from the Division of Natural Heritage in the Department of Conservation and Recreation of Wavyleaf's distribution in Virginia. The red dots are the sites that were present all the way up through 2018, documented through 2018, and these green pins are sites that were added in 2019 and in 2020. You can see here in Central Virginia and along the Blue Ridge, this section here from Route 64 up to Route 66 is generally Shenandoah National Park, and there are populations that are spreading out from Shenandoah National Park to other areas. This is a huge one that we have found south of Charlottesville, probably 100 acres or so, shared between an Albemarle County Park and a Martin Marietta mine site on a steep mountain slope of Dudley Mountain in Albemarle County. So I could go into each one of these because I know most of these sites. And up in Northern Virginia, I don't, as I move through the next several slides, I'm not going to be talking so much about Northern Virginia populations and incidences, except to note the very large population at a nature conservancy preserve along the Potomac River. That there may be about 100 acres or so of diffuse populations of Wavyleaf, and it's spreading out from there into Fairfax County sites and even down into Crow's Nest. Could have gotten to Crow's Nest down in Spotsylvania or Stafford County, right along the Potomac River, from here or from here. Here are Wavyleaf occurrences in Shenandoah National Park. As I said, the biggest populations in the state have been in Shenandoah National Park. It's unclear how they got there. The first ones were found down in this West Swift Run area in 2005 or 6. This is where our property is, right, oops, sorry, right across the ridge, right in this area here, is where our 156 acres is and where we have found it on our property. So Jake Hughes of Shenandoah National Park is tracking about 11 or so major infestation sites, plus about 50 or so smaller patches that are distributed around the park as a whole. And here's some data on those 11 sites from Jake. The acreage that's associated with these includes survey acres, which would be about a quarter of a mile or so around any known patches or carpets on the site. So you can expect, if you got, like in Swift Run, if you've got maybe 100 acres of relatively highly infested, intensely infested acres, that out from there, there are going to be many more distal or distant patches that are spreading off of that site out of the intensely infested areas where deer, bear, small mammals are moving the seed across the landscape. And this is what Jake and his crews have been able to treat in the park in recent years. So you can see some of these sites have only been partially treated. That is all he's had the resources for. Some have been fully treated on an annual basis. Here's the budget situation that Shenandoah National Park is facing. Currently, they have about $50,000 per year available from 2018 through 2022. They need on the order of $470,000 to be able to survey and treat the probably thousands or so acres that they know they've got, either infested or where it could be. Jake's assessment of the chances that with the current budget, they could reduce the effort to 1 crew day per year by 2022, trying to get some sense from Jake of where the park is qualitatively on the treatment of Wavyleaf in the park. And this is his sense with 6 out of the 11 sites of his ability to control it, to at least to this extent, to just doing one walk around, let's say with a crew of 4 or so, one walk around day. This is his sense of what would be possible with the current budget. And so there are 5 sites that are not even on this list at all, meaning that Jake is not at all confident that he can, with the current budget and resources, he'll be able to get those sites under control. He is having success treating small patches around the park, and that is finding that within a year to 2 years through hand weeding, making sure that you get back to those small patches. The seed bank is not deep enough with and extensive enough with just a small patch. It hasn't been laying seed down long enough for it to survive for more than 2 to 3 years. That has generally been my experience on our property as well. Here is a slide of PRISM related sites, that is sites that we have been directly involved in either managing or funding the management of, or liaising with, getting information on and encouraging and supporting in various ways. Each one of these sites has its own story, and I could talk for 15 minutes on any one of them. They all have their own challenges. I'll just take PATC for a moment and note that a volunteer who worked on some of our volunteer work days, Mark, who's a PATC volunteer, was up cleaning the latrines servicing PATC cabins in Mutton Hollow, one of the PATC properties, and threw out a bucket of slop into a patch of Wavyleaf. And because he'd been working on Wavyleaf in Shenandoah National Park, he knew exactly what he was throwing that slop onto. Called me up immediately, and we got there and surveyed, found about 2 acres or so of distributed patches, a couple of big ones, and treated it immediately. That is what we need. We need eyes on the ground. We need people who know what the plant looks like and know who to get in touch with first to report it, and even better, to be able to treat it. Down here are those Martin Marietta and William Woods, Albemarle County Park properties on Dudley Mountain. Here's a private property down here with additional 25 or so acres of it. This is our property in here with probably 10 or so singletons and small patches that I've discovered over the last 5 or 6 years. And Augusta County Park with about 40 acres or so of it yet to be treated at all. And I'll be on the phone with hopefully with Augusta County officials next week, park folks, and checking in with them on the prospects for getting that site treated. This is a slide of the funding that we've been able to generate for the program, for a control program. We won a $250,000 award from the DuPont Settlement Program in 2017, which generated 5 years of funding, 50,000 or so per year, which we're allocating 35,000 to Shenandoah National Park to treat about 400 acres amongst 5 or 6 sites. And then $15,000 a year we're allocating to about a 60, 75 acre site in Elkton, the Elk Run Woods, a project that I have been managing for the last 3 years. And in both of these cases, we are through 3 years of a 5-year treatment. And the Elk Run project is interesting. This is one where we've been able, with a $15,000 budget, we've been able to treat it twice in any given year. 1 week's worth or so of treatment with an AmeriCorps team using backpack sprayers, and then another 4 weeks worth of treatment from the Shenandoah National Park, the Park Services Mid-Atlantic Invasive Plant Management Team that come in with large tank sprayers, 150-gallon tanks and 600-foot hoses, and is able to cover large areas with a spray gun using clethodim, which is a grass-specific herbicide that doesn't take out the rest of the vegetation. And we think we may be able to knock this plant out largely in 5 years. We're well on the way there. To my knowledge, even in Maryland, there hasn't been a full-on continuous 5-year or 5-year plus treatment for any site so far. So we're kind of at the, as far as we know, at the leading edge of a thorough treatment of a very infested site, and are on the verge of discovering what level of effort it actually does take to put out an intense, extensive infestation. In addition to the DuPont Settlement Program, we also won or were provided with $45,000 grant through the Department of Forestry, Virginia's Department of Forestry. Thank you, Caitlin and Lori. U.S. Forest Service money, and we've just begun to deploy those funds in Albemarle County sites. And this is a list of the sites which several of which I've referred to already. We're just at the start of that, and if it's going to take 5 or so years to treat highly infested sites, then we have our work cut out for us, generating more money to go beyond a 3-year treatment program for these sites. And here's just a few photos of people doing the work. Here's Jake Hughes, here's Mark of PATC and others treating Wavyleaf in Shenandoah National Park, one of those volunteer Wavyleaf treatment days. More volunteers getting ready to go, doing the work out in the middle of the forest, 95 degrees, 95% humidity. That was a real act of stamina. We covered about between 10 and 15 acres for Jake, a huge value add beyond what he, at that point, this is probably a 2015, 2016 photo, beyond what he could get done with his resources, internal resources within the park. Appalachian Conservation Corps, these are AmeriCorps volunteers funded through the AmeriCorps program from the Corporation for National and Community Service out of Washington, D.C., a very valuable program providing young people with extremely valuable field experience and getting a lot of good ecological work done in the landscape. Photos of the Park Service's invasive plant management team in Elkton. And here's a UTV outfitted, tricked out with a big tank sprayer and probably a 100-foot hose. And here is the big 150-gallon sprayer and 600-foot hoses, 2 of them, and a very powerful pump here. They can run 2 hoses simultaneously. It's an impressive operation. They cover a lot of ground. So what can you do? By all means, learn to identify and recognize the plant, and then report it. Download the Maiden application to your phone. That's the Mid-Atlantic Early Detection Network application, and you can get it at this website, edmaps.org. So download the app. That's what it looks like on your phone, a couple of screens on your phone. Very easy to use, very intuitively easy to use. You can take photos with it, record GPS waypoints. You can take the data out in the field when you don't have a GPS, or excuse me, a web connection. Take it back, and when you've got a signal, you can send it directly or via Wi-Fi. And please report these sightings as well to Beth at blueridgeprism.org or info@blueridgeprism.org. Beth didn't know that I was going to say that. Thank you very much, Beth, in advance. We love to take more information too and have as complete information about incidents on the landscape as possible. If you should choose to control it where you see it, if it's on your property or you get access in some way, know that it is treatable while it's still green June through October. But make sure that you're very careful from late July through November because of the presence of that sticky seed. You want to avoid getting it on your boots, clothing, and make sure that you practice good hygiene and do not carry the seed out of the infested area with you. Herbicide treatment, you can use systemic herbicides that are most effective for a complete kill, given the possibility of breaking off stolons if you're going to hand weed. So you can use a grass-specific herbicide. I mentioned that before. And here's the recipe: 3 ounces of clethodim 2E, 3 ounces of surfactant, 3 ounces of marker dye in 3 gallons of water in a backpack sprayer. That's great to do, again, anywhere in June or July. Very effective method. You want to use a grass specific when there's enough native plants worth saving. When there are not enough native plants worth saving, where the Wavyleaf has simply overwhelmed the site and suppressed everything else, you might as well use glyphosate, which is less expensive, and acts more quickly than the grass specific. And here's the formula for glyphosate. Use a 2% chemical concentration, which means, translation, 8 to 10 ounces of the product, depending on whether the product is coming at a 40% to 50% concentration. Okay, and then in addition to the product itself, 8 to 10 ounces, use again 3 ounces of surfactant, 3 ounces of dye in a 3-gallon water mix in a backpack sprayer. Again, you can hand weed singletons in small patches by completely removing the stolons. Difficult to do. You have to be it's a little bit fiddly, but you can get the whole root system out. That's what I've got for you. Thanks for your time, for your attention. I hope this was helpful to you. As I said, we need eyes on the landscape, and we need people running around with smartphones and the Maiden app and reporting it. That's the most valuable thing that you could do. When you're out in any kind of a natural area, have that with you and record those waypoints and report them, please. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Jim. That was a really nice overview of where we're at right now. A lot of work on the ground happening. And I expressed it in the comment section, but I just want to sing the praises of the AmeriCorps program and the young people that sign up for that program. It is such a great opportunity, and I've worked with a number of AmeriCorps programs and have been so impressed by the caliber of work that you get with a little teaching. They got it. So I'm glad to hear that they're being actively used for this kind of project. We had a couple of questions. One was about the treatment, and you gave us a good overview of control. We had one question was about how toxic are the treatments. So I think they're asking just about the general toxicity of the herbicide, or, you know, are there places where you can and can't use it, for example?
So herbicide toxicity, of course, is a deep topic, and
It is.
if anybody attends the workshop tomorrow, I'll dive into that topic a little bit. And so there's, you know, glyphosate, of course, has received a lot of attention and press recently. But just the headline on glyphosate is that it is probably the most safest broad spectrum herbicide that can be used on the landscape. It can be used around water, as opposed to the grass-specific herbicides, which generally come in an oil formulation, which are toxic to aquatic wildlife. So you don't want to use the clethodim 2E around any standing or flowing water. And you could make the switch to glyphosate if you're spraying along a stream bank, for example. When you get close to the stream, switch to glyphosate from the clethodim.
Yeah.
That's as much as I'll say about toxicity at this point.
With noting that the glyphosate around water needs to be one approved for the use around water, because it's not your everyday Roundup.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Roundup.
Thank you, Rod.
Yeah. Roundup itself can be, it's the surfactants or something that are toxic.
That's
so
that's correct. You do not want to use Roundup around water.
Yes. So make sure to read those labels. The label is the law.
Yes.
Okay, and we have one more question about the seeds of wavy leaf grass. If you get seeds on your clothes, will washing the clothes destroy the seeds? How do you handle your seeds on your clothing?
The way we would handle them is to use duct tape, for example.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've used it with little tiny ticks, but not wavy.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So you want to use something sticky on your jeans or on your shirt, and simply pull it off. It adheres to the gluey surface of the duct tape. That's probably the best way to do it. Make sure that you use a boot brush as well, and if you can, perform this hygiene on site. Don't go off site not having thoroughly checked yourself and removed seed.
Okay. And do you
I don't know what to tell you about whether Wavyleaf will survive a washing or not.
Yeah.
I might not trust it. I might not trust it if your washer is draining out onto a natural area, which some of ours might, right? You might have a hose buried and it drains out 15, 20, 30, 50 feet from the house onto a natural area. I wouldn't do that. But perhaps if it's draining out, through a regular water sewer system, it's not likely to get deposited anywhere where it will grow.
Right. Good point. Okay. All right. Well, those are all of the questions that we have today, and we are at 4:08. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up the program for today. So many thanks to you, Jim, for giving us a good overview and update of wavy leaf grass. And if you have any sightings of wavy leaf, please send them to us or report them on the Maiden app. And if you need help with any of that, please send it to Beth at blueridgeprism.org. All right.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Rod, did you have anything else to offer before we close out today?
No. I was just contemplating whether I should ask Jim whether he advocates burning the clothes to kill the seeds.
Burning the clothes to kill the seeds? I suppose that depends on your budget.
Yeah.
But no, hey, well done. Great stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists today that joined us and gave their time to help educate all of us about invasive species and new things that are coming in and things to watch for and things that we've been dealing with for a while. So thanks to everyone. And I also want to say thank you to all of our attendees today for taking time out of your day to join us here at PRISM. And as you exit the webinar, you will have a survey, and if you would take a few minutes to complete that, and that will help us to make better and new programs for you in the future. So with that, I will close it out and say thank you.